Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a regular meeting of the Pacific Grove Council, City Council. It's Wednesday, May 1st, 2024. It's 6 p.m. I'll call the meeting to order and note that all council members are present with the exception of council members Beck and Padori. And Pledge of Allegiance, I'll ask our Mayor Pro Tem Smith to help us with that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, Your Honor. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 502. We have one presentation. I have a proclamation, Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, May 2024. And I'll read it. Whereas President Jimmy Carter annual proclamations have been made starting with Asian/Pacific American Heritage Week and evolving to AAPI Heritage Month under President H.W. Bush in 2009. This month coincides with two key milestones: the arrival of the nation's first Japanese immigrants in May 1843 and Chinese workers' pivotal role in building the Transcontinental Railroad completed in May 1869. By the mid to late 1800s, Asian immigrants arrived on the Monterey Peninsula, notably establishing the Point Alambes and Point Alones Chinese fishing village in Pacific Grove, which tragically burned down in 1906. And by early 1900, a Japanese business was operating downtown Pacific Grove, and a Japanese tea house was built at Lovers Point. This month recognizes and honors the contributions, achievements, and influence of Asian Americans and Pacific Islander Americans who have positively shaped the culture and enriched the history of the United States despite segregation and discrimination. Whereas our community supports local AAPI organizations, including the Japanese American Citizens League, Monterey Bay Chapter, it's JACL, the Monterey Bay Chinese Association, MBCA, and Monterey Peninsula College Asian Student Association. Now, therefore, I, Bill Peak, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Pacific Grove, do hereby recognize the many ways AAPI citizens enrich and strengthen our community. Thank you for listening. All right, we'll now go to announcements, report outs. Mr. Pyrrhic.
We have no reportable action from our closed session today.
And Mr. Peralt.
Yes, a couple of announcements, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I wanted to just let everyone know that the first joint city school district meeting was held last Tuesday. It was held at the district offices. and it was a very successful meeting. The purpose behind this meeting in particular is to create a venue for the sharing of issues and matters that are common to both entities. It is a discussion only subcommittee, no actions are taken, but information can then flow from the subcommittee back to the boards or commissions. I just wanted to let you know on that first agenda, some of the items that were discussed was an update on the housing element, complete streets, safe routes to school program, discussion regarding the joint facilities use agreement, and some discussion about pickleball courts and tennis courts. And I've got to tell you that those members present were at least willing to take a look at future opportunities relative to the use of those facilities. The other thing I just want to say is you all know Good Old Days begins in 2 days, and the city will be an active participant. We're going to have booths out there, including from the Community Development Department, the Police Department, and I believe the Rec Department. Fire Department will also be doing their Kids Challenge as they normally do. And the library electric vehicle will be in the parade. And that concludes my announcements.
Thank you. Council announcements. I have one. Looks like you said it all, Mr. Brawl. Council will be, as usual, marching in the parade. 10 o'clock, the parade starts. So I'm reminding my colleagues, be there early. Okay. Rain or shine, and it looks like there might be some rain. Hope not. All right. Now, turning to general public comment, please come forward if you wish to speak. Welcome.
Mayor, council members, my name is Don Murphy. I'm on your planning commission, but I'm just speaking as a resident. And I just want to say thank you to the Public Works Department and perhaps to the interim city manager, whoever was responsible for eliminating the crosswalk at Lighthouse and Fountain. And by that act, I believe you've made the city much safer for pedestrians and those of us who are concerned about safety, and really appreciate it. And if I thank the wrong people, please pass along my thanks to whoever was responsible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Mayor, Council, thank you very much. Good to be here. My name is Mike Gibbs. I'm a resident and a member of the EDC. I'm speaking on my own behalf. I don't know if you've noticed that I think I sense a change in direction. A little bit. We're going to go through some tough times up until the election, but I'm sensing a more positivity, or I'm not sure what it is. Maybe you feel it too. Maybe it doesn't seem this way, but today I posted my friend Francois, he wrote an article for the Chronicle. Some of you got an advanced draft of it, talking about pensions. PG is mentioned in the article. I was banned from Nextdoor for posting the article. Okay. The Chronicle is a fairly liberal paper. They've had a series of articles and opinion pieces critical of our dearly beloved governor and about rapidly rising utility rates and the complicity of the PUC in avoiding public hearings. Also highlighting the governor's failure to do anything about home insurance crisis. The good news is I got my bill. My State Farm bill only went up by 14%. The good news is they didn't cancel my coverage. Last Sunday, Emily Hoven wrote an outstanding opinion piece in the Chronicle titled "Tricks Don't Mask Budget Woes." And she highlighted a couple of things. California significantly overestimated its revenues last year. High interest rates are suppressing tech and startup companies. Remember, I think this is all positive. There's a $73 billion hole in the California budget, according to the LAO. Newsom has already reached into his bag of tricks and has been moving costs into the next year, which we'll then have to pay. The state has a 5.3 unemployment rate, the highest in the country. I could go on. We know that there's $24 billion that's spent on housing and homelessness. They did an audit. Nobody knows exactly what happened to the money. Right. So this is our government. But I think these things are going out into the public and people are starting to pay attention. They're starting to ask questions. That's a good thing. So you may make your own conclusions, but mine are help is not coming. California cities are on their own, like Pacific Grove. And I think it's going to cause us to pull together. I think it's going to cause us to come together on getting legislation passed and things done for the city of Pacific Grove. So I think it's a good thing, right? For me, basically, we already know this, but could this time of crisis actually be an opportunity to reclaim citizens' control that was granted to us and our rights granted to us by the U.S. Constitution? And I'll just finish with a political statement. Insanity is sending the same people back to Sacramento and expecting them to do better. It's not happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. That was an excellent presentation, one of your best. I'm here today to point out, you may or may not have known that there's an excellent article in the current issue of the Pinecone right on the front page. Look at the title here. This was a Superior Court limits reach of housing mandate law. And it's all about 5 cities, also charter cities, by the way. Did you know Pacific Grove was a charter city? And we have special rights. Some of you may know that. And having among those special rights, the state can't come in and tell you what to do like they can do with non-charter cities. So these 5 charter cities who took the state to court on the mandate that was going to require them to build many housing units and is requiring Pacific Grove to build 1,100 units. You know, we're going to destroy the character of the town. You're going to have people building homes, squeezing them in on the corner of their property because zoning laws are going to be changed if you go along with this state mandate. We were told for years we didn't have enough water to add a bathroom onto your house. Now we're going to build 1,100 units, and some of those are going to have 2 and 3 bathrooms. Isn't that amazing? Where do we find the water? Well, this is what happens when you have outside agencies like the state legislature in Sacramento and a governor who doesn't live here either, come to Pacific Grove and push us around and tell us what you need to decide is best for Pacific Grove. They're going to decide for you. Now, I suggested many weeks ago that you stand up and do something to fight against this. Well, I don't know if you did or not, but you're not mentioned in this article. It mentions Redondo Beach, Torrance, Del Mar, and Whittier as the cities who grouped together to take this legal action against the state. And guess what? The judge decided that SB 9 is unconstitutional and violates the home rule doctrine, which the state constitution allows cities to make and enforce all ordinances and regulations in respect to municipal affairs. So that was your option to get involved in this lawsuit. But I don't know if you did. Maybe you'd like to disclose to the public when I'm done. You don't have to answer me. I know you don't have to respond. But I'm shocked that you've been so lenient in protecting the values of the community, the aesthetics, the resources, and the potential taxation to the public. I'm just shocked. And I want to encourage you to, maybe get together with the staff if that's necessary and decide to do something, because as a resident homeowner taxpayer, I'm appalled that the character of this town is going to change. Right now, parking in many neighborhoods is a premium. So we're going to put more units in those streets, and the people are going to have less places to park. I think the whole thing's ridiculous. The water, the whole thing's a sham, and you're going along with it. I have 3 seconds left. Thank you. Bye.
Welcome.
Thank you. Peggy Gibbs, resident of Pacific Grove. I wanted to thank all of you for doing the volunteer appreciation event. It was wonderful. And I know all the volunteers appreciated it but it was also really great to see the staff. And they were all out serving everyone. And it was just one of those moments when everyone comes together and the community is better for it. So thank you for doing those. I know it's an effort behind it, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you. Do we have any virtual public comment?
We do, Mayor. Carmelita Garcia.
Good evening, and thank you all for your service. Like the previous speaker, I just want to thank all of you for the volunteer appreciation luncheon. It's very nice to be able to gather with all the other city volunteers and to meet one another and simply just enjoy the company. And I really appreciate the awards that are provided during the event. It just really makes for a much more special occasion. So thank you very much.
No further virtual hands are up.
More public comment? Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me speak. Even though you had the other people and you went to virtual. My name is Andy Kubica, and I'm a resident of Pacific Grove, and I'm speaking as a resident, not a member of the Planning Commission. What I would like to ask today is, what is the status of the pier? It started off, I believe the pier saga started off in January of 2021. It got into a capital improvement in a fiscal 21-22 budget. We then got a report in December of 21, I believe. It went out for bid, and there was a report generated a year later. And the latest was October 4th of this year of 2023, that a presentation was made to council, and council gave direction to staff. I sent an email to staff in February and said, what's the status? And they said they're in the permit process. So today is May 1st. I don't understand how long permits take. I would like to know if there's a schedule, if we're ever going to fix the pier. The reason I'm asking is I was sitting at the restaurant, the Beachfront Cafe, the other day and watching all the people on the pier and seeing all the rust and the degraded pier. And I don't believe that's what Pacific Grove is. I believe Pacific Grove is a beautiful city. And that's why I moved here. And thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, we'll close public comment. Moving on to the consent agenda. Anyone on council wishing to pull a consent agenda item?
I don't want to pull anything, but I do want to just make a brief statement that I really appreciated the code compliance report. I thought the information in that was very useful, and I thank the CDD director for bringing that forward.
Anyone from the public wishing to pull a consent agenda item?
No hands online, Mayor.
A motion, please?
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 502. Which brings us to 11A, ordinance amending the fiscal budget. Mr. Pearl?
Yes, and I believe this report is going to be given by Joyce Hallaby.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. The item before you tonight is a first reading of an ordinance to amend the current year's fiscal budget. I will spare you from reading the full recommendation verbatim, but it is included in your agenda report. Essentially, we're introducing and holding a first reading of an ordinance to amend the operating and capital improvement program budget for the fiscal year 23-24. So this budget was approved in June. It's customary for us to revisit council when and if we need to make adjustments to the budget that are in alignment with the council's objectives. And obviously any amendments require council approval. So the request tonight is to allocate an additional $272,000 of sewer enterprise funding for the approved fiscal year 23-24 street rehabilitation project, which is an element of our capital improvement program. The agenda report does include an attachment which has the draft ordinance, if you'd like to reference it. So what is the street rehab project? Each year we do one big street rehabilitation project. And this specific project this year targets 5 segments of aging road infrastructure on Locust, Willow, Wood, Grand, and Pearl. So these 5 roads are in awful condition. They're actually all in a failed status with a pavement condition index rating ranging from 0 to 19. So the PCI ranges from 0, which is the worst possible score you could get, to 100. And all of these roads are in the very low range in a failed status. So these segments were selected based on our pavement management program and various in-field observations from our crews. And just a visual representation of the condition of the roadways, you can see here, they're cracked, they've been patched several times over, and even on the bottom right-hand side, Pearl Street is essentially dirt in segments. So they're in dire need of repair, and I think these photos do a good job of illustrating that. So the reason we're here tonight is the project also includes sewer improvements. So at the onset, when we were developing the capital improvement program for this fiscal year, we had anticipated the need to repair some of the sewer infrastructure based on both the age and our records. Some sewer infrastructure, we anticipated that some would need to be replaced, and so the original budget included sewer enterprise funds. During engineering, we CCTV videoed the lines, and the videoing revealed that the lines were in dire need of replacement on Locust, Willow, and Wood for the full stretch from Cynics to Unipro, and then as well on Grand from Gibson to Unipro. Undertaking the sewer work and the underground infrastructure is critical for both environmental protection, health and safety, and it really ensures that the investment that we're making, which is upwards of $1 million on road and pavement infrastructure, it's preserved and it reaches its intended service life. So we want to prevent disrupting future road cuts for underground repairs, which just allow water intrusion and just help the road rapidly degrade. So in this case, we engineered the project, and that included replacing all of those lines, which it equals 2,540 linear feet. And it also includes reconstruction of 12 manholes. So here's the approved project funding. We currently have project funding from the General Fund, Measure X, SB1, and the Sewer Fund. What we're requesting, again, is an additional $272,000 from the Enterprise Fund. This is following a competitive bid process. That's the amount that we need in order to fund those sewer elements. That additional allocation would allow for construction of the sewer improvements, a construction contingency, as well as allow for the remaining city engineer activities. So construction management, doing the as-built, any other engineering activities that are associated with construction and post-construction. There is sufficient sewer enterprise funding to accommodate this request. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions.
Any public comment on this item? Please come forward. Welcome.
Thank you. Every 2 months, I receive a bill in the mail as a property owner. And I don't know how many independent properties there are in Pacific Grove. I'm going to guess it must be 1,500 or 2,000. That's just a guess, but I know it's not less than 1,000. And on that bill, it comes every 2 months, there's a $64 charge for the sewer fund in Pacific Grove. It's not a county thing, it's a city thing. $64 per resident. Let's assume there were only 1,000. That would be $64,000 collected every 2 months times 12 for the year, times how many years have we been burdened as property owners with that, what I consider excessive charge? Because I thought all the sewer repairs were supposed to be done years ago. Yet this continues. One councilman did take up this issue and present it to the public, and that was Councilperson Coletti, as I recall, might have been 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And for some reason, the town was cajoled into voting to continue, but I guess they probably felt it was necessary. They didn't fully understand that nothing was completing the sewer project as it should have been. So I take objection to the fact that we're still paying that, but the positive thing is you must have quite a bankroll in that sewer fund. I don't know how much you've been spending every year on it, but 64 times the number of residents, I'm going to guess a minimum 1,000, maybe 1,500 or 2,000 times 12 times 6 bills a year. That's quite a substantial amount of money that's going into the city coffers, into that specific sewer fund. So if this young lady who made such an eloquent and well-versed presentation has any significance to you, it rings a bell that this is a good project that needs to be addressed. I don't see how you could not have $200,000 or so in the sewer fund. I don't even know if you need to use the enterprise fund. You'll have to figure that out. But as a resident, just, not being a professional, not following every budget item and not following all of the resources that the city has, I'd be interested to see if you're going to approve this, because I think we must have some money in there because it sounds like a worthwhile project. And I want to thank her for making that presentation. Thanks for listening to me as a resident taxpayer for over 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, good evening, City Council and Mayor. I only have one question, and it's a general question, or maybe we're all worried about wildfires and burying of power lines. Is there any chance we could be burying some of the power lines since we're digging up the street for the sewer? Is there any chance of burying the power lines at the same time? I know it's late and there has been some engineering in there, so I know it's late in the project design. If it can't be done this way, for this project, could the city look into in future projects, either at this one, if you're going to cut the ground open, is there a way to just in the future make it a requirement, if not with this project, but future projects, that we start burying lines little by little as we dig up the streets before we pave them? Thank you.
Thank you. Any virtual public comment?
No hands are raised, Mayor.
Council discussion? Council Member McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, obviously, I think that this is a great idea. And thank you very much for the presentation, for clearly laying out where the funds are available, making a really nice, transparent process. Obviously, this is something that's extremely important to the infrastructure of the city. So I'm 100% behind it. Thank you.
Councilmember Clutty.
Thank you, Your Honor. A quick question on the Pearl Street improvements. Will they begin after the pucking season?
Councilmember Coletti through the mayor. Dan will, I don't want to steal his thunder too much. There's an item on the agenda later tonight to award a contract, but he will talk about coordination with NOAA and for our construction timelines.
Okay, I will wait till then.
I'll jump in and say thank you very much. And I recognize as standard great practice is when the road before maintaining the road, that the sewer lines are looked at, and invariably it seems like if there's a failed road, then road surface that below it is a failed sewer line too. But but it's done right. We save some money by doing it those simultaneously. So thank you for implementing always that practice. Appreciate it. I want to give Mr. Pro, maybe you could give an opportunity for staff to make a pitch as to what we do with all that sewer fees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I may call on Mr. Go for the actual specifics, but the sewer fees are basically based on a rate that the council approves through a 218 process, which takes a look, and it's important to remember that our share of the sewer is really the collection system. We, the city of Pacific Grove, is responsible for the maintenance and improvement of the collection system. And that's an ongoing activity. Those costs are directly related through the Proposition 218 process to the rates that people pay. So a portion of those rates that they pay every 2 months goes into both the maintenance of the collection system as well as improvements that are made in keeping with the sewers master plan. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the council just recently approved projects to complete the last phase of that master plan. And I think there were at least a couple $1 million worth of improvements. So that is all done proactively to make sure that that collection system continues to operate efficiently and effectively. Mr. Go, do you have anything to add?
I think that pretty well summed it up. The sewer fees that are collected from residents on their bill and soon to be their tax bill are used for maintenance, capital improvement, engineering, overall collection of our sewer conveyance system, and then ultimately aiding in the flow of that wastewater to Marina for potential reuse in the near future, as we heard at the last city council meeting. So yeah, overall, it's the whole conveyance system. It's a utility, and the city has a utility and state mandates and requirements, including significant documents that need to be prepared on an annual, biannual, and every 5-year sequence to make sure we comply with all these requirements. That's what's used. That's what's derived from the sewer fund. It's very complex.
Mr. Mayor, one final comment. I would just like to compliment the council as well as the Public Works Director, because I always think it's excellent foresight that when you're going to take on a street project, that you look at the infrastructure that underlies that a street project, because that ensures that you're not going to have to dig that street up to repair a sewer line down the road. And also to note that, as Mr. Go said, the $272,000 is coming from the sewer fund, and the genesis of those dollars is the $64 that's collected every two months.
Thank you for that. I would just throw out a couple of numbers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we have about over 60 miles of streets. And so we have, I think 50 miles or more of sewer lines.
59 miles, Mayor Peak.
59 miles, thanks. And so that has to be cleaned. I believe the maintenance for cleaning the lines, that bill, I believe it's Green Line, does it for us. And it's between 2 to 3 million a year just for cleaning the sewer system.
The whole operating budget is approximately multiple millions. That's correct.
Yeah, and a lot of our sewer pipes are VCP, are
Vertified clay pipe.
certified clay pipe. Thank you. And it could be 75, 100 years old. And, right? And that's what we need to replace.
You are correct, sir.
Yeah, so the money goes to the sewer fund. The sewer fund, the fees go into sewer fund. The sewer fund can only pay for expenses associated with the sewer. Can't be used for anything else. And it's well funded. And next year, in 2025, I'm sure we're going to be relooking at the sewer fund and the fees and deciding what's the right amount per month. Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Helby, for the presentation. I know it's the sewer, but my last term, I walked those streets and they were pretty rough. And I got complaints from them. So I would like to make a motion, Mayor, that requests the city attorney read the title of the ordinance.
This is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Pacific Grove amending the operating and capital projects budget for fiscal year 2023-2024.
Okay. And to introduce and hold the first reading of an ordinance amending the fiscal year 23-24 operating and capital improvement budget and direct the publication of the ordinance will be satisfied by publication of a summary approved by the city attorney.
You need a second?
Second, for the record.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 502. On to item 11B, amending the salary classification schedule. Mr. Peralt?
Did they waive the reading?
Was that included in the motion? Well, I listened to what you said, but apparently the clerk picked up that you didn't say waive further reading of the ordinance. So why don't you just make another motion to make a motion to waive further reading of the ordinance?
Okay, I'll go ahead and make the motion to read the ordinance.
Second, it's number 2 on the item. I'll second it.
Okay, and this includes number 3, the recommended actions number 3 and number 4. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 502. To item 11B.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, during the last council meeting, the council approved the employment contract for the new city manager. And that included a change in the annual base salary. The annual base salary is going to be $251,680 annually. This is not reflected in the current schedule, so it is appropriate that the council should adopt the ordinance, changing the schedule to match what the agreement amount is as listed in that agreement. I do want to mention as well that the city manager pro tem will also be modified, that payment schedule, because it aligns with the city manager's schedule. Should note that the only time that the pro tem position is filled is when there's a long-term vacancy or an absence of the city manager. So based on that, the staff's recommendation is for the council to request the city attorney to read the title of the ordinance and waive further reading and introduce the first reading of the ordinance amending the salary classification schedule for the city manager and the city manager pro tem. That concludes the report.
Thank you. Public comment? Virtual public comment?
No virtual public comment, Mayor.
Motion?
Yes, Your Honor, I would request the city attorney read the title of the ordinance as
Yes,
recommended.
Yeah, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Pacific Grove amending the classification schedule to include a salary for city manager, and city manager pro tem. And in order to make sure we cover all the bases, I think the motion then would be items 2, 3, and 4 in the agenda, if you want to make that motion.
So moved. 2, 3, 4.
Second.
Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Coletti.
I believe the enacting clause is not consistent with the charter language. So I would just point that out to the city attorney.
We can make that change before it's signed.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 502. And that is all the recommended motions 1 through 4. Okay, on to item 12A, AB 481. Mr. Peralt?
Yes, Commander Anderson will provide that staff report. While they're pulling this up, by way of introduction, I just want to say that this is an annual report that is made to the council. It's made in accordance with California Assembly Bill 481. Hence, it is called the 481 report, and it requires California law enforcement agencies to obtain approval for a military equipment use policy from their applicable governing body before taking certain actions related to the finding and acquisition or use of military equipment. This is pretty straightforward. I know that Commander Anderson he has the the presentation up now on the computer monitors.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Councilman, council members. Tonight, we're here to talk about Assembly Bill 481, military equipment owned by the police department. All right, in September, to give you a little background about Assembly Bill 481, September 30th, 2021, Governor Newsom signed the bill into effect. The purpose behind the bill was to increase transparency, accountability, oversight for the acquisition and use of military equipment. And at the heart of it, it was to provide safeguards to protect the public's welfare, safety, civil rights, and liberties. Now, part of the annual reporting required with the bill is first to hold a town hall meeting at least 30 days before presenting to the city council. And our community meeting was held on March 27th, 2024. Give you a little summary of our annual report. It consists of how the military equipment was used and its purpose, complaints or concerns related to military equipment, and any actions taken in response. The total annual cost for each type of military equipment and how the funds were sourced, the quantity possessed for each type of military equipment, and the intention to acquire any additional military equipment in the current or following year, the quantity sought for each type of military equipment also. So Pacific Grove Police Department currently has two 40mm projectile launchers, 5 less lethal shotguns, 22 department issued rifles. And this year we will be acquiring 5 additional rifles for the department. The acquisition of 5 additional rifles is an operational need that will enhance our capability with responding to critical incidents. It will also provide uniformity in training for every officer who will be using the same type of rifle. The spare rifles will ensure that we can replace any malfunctioning equipment. And the new rifles have technological advancements that will improve accuracy and accessory compatibility. The Monterey Peninsula Regional Special Response Unit, commonly referred to as SRU, Pacific Grove Police Department receives and provides mutual aid to and from all area law enforcement agencies. Agencies are required by AB 41 to get approval from their governing body for the equipment owned. There is no currently there is no SRU equipment owned or maintained by the city of Pacific Grove. We have 1 member on the SRU team, and we have 2 members on the crisis negotiation team. SRU did not respond to any incidents in Pacific Grove during 2023. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item? Virtual public comment?
Virtual public comment, Mayor.
I'm going to start off council discussion. Thank you, Commander Anderson. Well, I'll convince. I'll be frank. When someone says military equipment, rifle doesn't exactly spring to mind. I know the firearms that the police department have are appropriate, but we don't have anything else that I think most people would call military equipment, but that definition is specified, I assume, in law. Is that right?
Yes, yes, it is. Because of the platform and that it looks like military equipment, we typically report out on it.
And you had a hearing, and I understand no members of the public appeared.
No, no, we advertised the town hall meeting and there was no members that showed up that evening.
Well, clearly the public must think the police department is doing a really good job. I don't have anything to come
Appreciate that,
talk
Mayor.
about. In council discussion, if not, a motion? Oh,
Received.
it's received report,
Yes.
so,
Thank you.
all right. Thank you for your service. Appreciate it. Item 12B.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the Deputy City Manager, Public Works Director, Dan Go, will provide the staff report.
Bear with me real quick. Okay, thank you, Your Honor, members of the city council. Bam, okay. So as you heard from Deputy Director Hallaby, she requested the allocation of funding. Now I'm coming here in front of you tonight to request the authorization to enter into an agreement with Monterey Peninsula Engineering for the 23-24 street rehabilitation project on segments of Locust, Willow, Wood, Grand, and Pearl Street in amount not to exceed $1,657,025 plus a 15% contingency. I will go right through this presentation rather quickly since you already know the crutch of the project. Okay, so we'll be rehabilitating 5 road segments with this project. Locust Street, which has a pavement condition index of a 3. Willow Street, which has a PCI of 7. Wood, which has a PCI of 19. Grand, which has a PCI of 10, and Pearl Street, which is a 0. And as you know, we're also going to be doing all of the wastewater lines that are underneath these roadways. When we engineered this, we also reached out to California American Water to determine if their infrastructure needed to be replaced. Their lines are newer through these segments. They opted not to partner with the city on this project as they have done in the past. I think I would know how to use this thing, right? No. Here, I got it right here. Okay, so just some pictures. As you can see, Locust Street, at the beginning of the street, we have puddling. The approach is damaged. The road's heavily alligator puddles, dips, so on and so forth. With the project, we're going to be doing an unconventional kind of driveway approach into each of these roadways. So what you would see at like a residential driveway is what we're going to be doing to enter into these roadways, because they're almost like a roadway slash alley, but they're considered roads. So we'll be reconfiguring all of these driveway approaches, roadway approaches, along with the project. They're going to look really nice. Willow Street, as you can see, multiple patches, alligatoring. The road's just not in good shape. These road segments will be replacing from Cynics to Junipero. Wood, again, you could see large dips, the road's failing there on the slide on the left, on the picture there. Lots of patches, lots of work has been done to these road segments, primarily probably from residents when they're replacing their sewer lateral lines. All of these connections will be done with part of the sewer project. This thing will be brand new when we're done with it. Grand, as you can see, lots of failures, dips, dirt. Grand, we're doing from Junipero to Gibson. And then Pearl Street, as Ms. Hallaby alluded to earlier, quite a bit of dirt. That's hence why the PCI of 0 on this project. So we put the project out to bid on April 5th. We received bid or our proposals. Monterey Peninsula Engineering at 1.6, Coastal Paving at 1.9, and Precision Grade at 1.8. We received 3 bids. They were all lower than the engineer's estimate. As you know, we've used Monterey Peninsula Engineering on multiple projects. They're definitely qualified to be able to perform this type of work. The scope of work is to reconstruct 39,400 square feet of significantly deteriorated pavement, 19 driveway approaches. So that's what I was talking about, is the exits and entrances to these roadways will have like a driveway approach that you're accustomed to as you enter your driveway at your house. That's the only way we could really make that work with the sidewalks. And there will be 1 curb ramp over on 8th Street. We'll be reconstructing 2,850 linear feet of sidewalk, 810 linear feet of curb and gutter, 2,540 feet of sewer main lines, and then the reconstruction of over 12 manholes associated with those sewer lines. So ease of maintenance will be also part of this project. We'll be able to maintain those lines easier. So some additional information following the execution of this contract, we will determine a construction schedule. It's anticipated that we will go beyond the end of this fiscal year, primarily because of Pearl Street, the question that was asked earlier. We will be working with NOAA and making sure that there's no seal disruption, primarily at the 5th Street and 8th Street rookeries with this project, since that's in the location there. We did receive a CDP exemption for Pearl Street. It's in the coastal zone. So we have all our permits squared away. And again, we will contact NOAA to discuss schedules with them on that segment of the roadway. It's anticipated that we'll do all the sewer work first, and then we'll start paving. So we're at least probably a month, month and a half, 2 months out before we even think about getting to Pearl. And in the coastal zone, we will have tribal and archaeological monitoring for Pearl Street, though we're not doing a lot of digging. We'll be grinding and then repaving that roadway. So here's the funding, the fiscal impact. We've got our general fund, Fund 63, which was our capital improvement fund. And then we've got Fund 17, which is Measure X, Fund 47, which is our SB1, our state transportation funding, and then the sewer fund, 600,000. That's the approved budget. Tonight, we allocated another 272,000 to the sewer budget for a total of 872,000. By us moving forward with this project, it ensures that we meet all of our maintenance of effort requirements for Measure X and SB1. We always meet these requirements. We always submit all of our annual reports to TMC and to the state in time, and hence why we keep receiving these funds year in and year out. And that concludes my report. Thank you very much. Look forward to doing this project.
Thank you. Public comment?
We do have some virtual public comment, Mr. Mayor. Lisa Ciani?
Thank you. So CDD gave this street rehab project that includes Pearl Street up to 8th Street a CDP exemption. Fortunately, the agenda report acknowledges that tribal and archaeological monitoring will occur during ground disturbance activities in the coastal zone. So that should apply to all of Pearl Street. However, the agenda report does not acknowledge what Dan and Joyce had pointed out, that Pearl and 8th Street is right across the street, right across Ocean View Boulevard from the Harbor Seal Rookery at the 5th Street Beach, which extends to 8th or 9th Street. And street work at that proximity needs to be done outside the seal pupping season. So I'm very glad to hear that Public Works will be working with NOAA to avoid any further problems, because it's been fabulous seeing the pups at the 5th Street Beach this year after two-year absence. But also, there are 2 major Monterey cypress trees on Pearl Street that must have their roots and critical root zone protected, and that's not acknowledged in the agenda report. The trees extend into the street, and the city must take responsibility for protecting them, just as private property owners are expected to do. The tree at Pearl and 10th Street is described by the arborist as being 85 inches in diameter and 48 feet high, in very good to excellent condition with a vigorous growth rate. It's on a site for which you upheld Planning Commission's approval of a project on a historic cottage that included protection of the Monterey cypress tree following the city's tree protection guidelines. Neighbors of the project got an arborist report, and the property owner agreed to provide their own arborist report following the council meeting. Those reports were sent to Mayor Peak and City Council with the request that the city provide the protection recommended by the arborist. That is, quote, frequent and routine monitoring of the cypress tree during and following construction activities. This tree and the one on the next block at the corner of Monterey Avenue and also growing into Pearl Street must have their roots and critical root zones protected during the street work. So that's just the same as construction. It's right there. So the roots are growing in all directions. Accommodations need to be made for the trees. A qualified arborist should be consulted and should be present during ground disturbance and repaving. Please request protections for the harbors we've done that for these 2 iconic trees as part of the work on Pearl Street. Thank you.
Marcia?
Thank you. Good evening, City Council. I have 2 questions. Maybe I'm naive, but with the discussion about sewer funding, now why is it that only Pacific Grove charges extra for maintaining the sewers? I have a friend in Carmel who said that's strange. She doesn't recall seeing that extra $64 or whatever it is every 2 months. And I guess secondly, street drains in the beach tract, particularly the Fairway Home section. A lot of the streets do not have street drains. And does that come under sewer funding? Because I mean, sometimes there's water that's collected and stays for like up to 2 months with green kind of moldy fungi stuff. And it's really disgusting. I don't know, is that going to be addressed at some point? So those are my 2 questions. I'd appreciate an answer possibly from Mr. Go and or the mayor. Thank you very much.
Lawrence and Dormer?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I want to agree with Lisa Chiani on everything she said about the trees and the Pearl Street project, because that is incredibly important, and it wasn't followed through right, even though the CDP got granted and the tree was not. There was a lot of controversy about this because the critical root line is not being protected. And I think that's incredibly important, and the arborists for the project people didn't follow through either. And for the street work, it is incredibly important for these old cypress trees. And as far as the sewer and money's being spent otherwise too, remember, we lent out of the sewer fund $600,000 to the local water project, which was not ever been self-sustaining. That boondoggle has required extra finances, and yes, it was a loan, and yes, it's being paid back. But next time the 218 comes up, which is going to expire, please protest it. That's how you deal with it, Marcia. Say no more. Thank you very much.
No further virtual comment, Mayor.
Right, council discussion. Maybe I'll jump in first, an easy one. Carmel, the city of Carmel by the Sea, they have their own sewage plant. It's in the lagoon. And so I don't know how that sewage plant and the sewage collection system is funded, but someone's paying for it. And I'll bet it's the residents and the businesses of the city of Carmel. Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
I said I agree with you.
Yes. And the residents of Monterey and Seaside and Sand City and Marina that use our sewage plant have fees. Let me ask about tree protection, Mr. Go. Could you
Absolutely,
address
Mayor
that
Peak.
concern?
Yes, so we do realize that these trees are significant and they're right adjacent to Pearl. And I'm aware of the root systems. There are exposed roots, and we've been discussing this with our engineer. And obviously, when you're engineering a project, you map the trees on the plan set, but you don't map the root system. So it's gonna have to be in-field adjustments when we're out there with the contractor, out there with our engineer. And I've already discussed this with our city arborist. We'll all be there and we'll make in-field adjustment to properly protect the trees, the root zones, but then adequately follow through with the paving of the roadway. I don't have it's not like I can wave the wand and say, we're just gonna avoid all this. We're gonna have to evaluate it. Maybe we don't go so deep over those roots, the exposed roots that are adjacent to the roadway. I've already talked to the engineer about possibly building like a berm to protect it, and we pave around it. So we're going to get creative and move forward that way. We have to do it in field with all parties present.
Thank you. Sounds good to me. And of course, we all like, everybody likes having paved roads that are in good condition.
Your Honor, I'll make a comment.
Yes. Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, those PCIs were pretty low tonight on that list. My Cynics improvements did make the cut, but I just wanted to get that from the middle school over, down the street. That's the wish list, but I've been talking about that for several years now.
I don't think it's a zero. Pro Tem Smith.
Yeah, I'm also talking about sidewalks. That's my real wish list, but it's for another day. But this is great. We need to do these, take care of these zeros and threes and twos, and then we can move our way up to the 10s and the 25s and all that. Thank you.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor. Kind of on that note, and thank you very much again for the clear presentation, laying everything out. And thank you to the public for bringing up the trees and for your explanation of the protections, because that is very important. So I know we're all looking forward to the day when we're not fixing failed roads and we're able to be more proactive. And I know that all these projects take time and money. So just on the assumption that, people are probably wondering, does it look like we're getting to the end of more of our failed roads and moving in that direction? Or do we still have some time to go and we're just kind of going through the process as quickly as is possible?
Road rehabilitation is expensive, so it's hard to tackle all roads that need it. So unfortunately, we're going to continue to have roads that are in a decline prior to us getting to them and rehabilitating them. It's just the nature of a municipality. We do our projects like a slurry seal, where we try to maintain those roadways that have higher PCIs so they don't continue to decline. We do that constant maintenance. I think that the level of funding that's associated with road work is going to allow us to address some of these failed roadways. But it's also not going to just instantly take us from like an overall PCI of, I believe we're at like 58 or 59 to an 80. We would have to allocate significant funding and resources to get there rather quickly. So I think that we're doing a very good job at maintaining our current status, which is suitable. And when we address roads like this, it significantly helps.
Thanks for that. And that's kind of what I wanted to point out, is the idea that I appreciate the approach you're taking to helping prolong the life of the roads that are in better shape so we can focus on repairing and pairing the sewer work. I really appreciate kind of that approach of taking care of multiple things in the most cost-effective way possible. Thank you.
Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you, Mayor. One of it's true, these PCIs are in the I would predict them to be the negative part, but I do want to bring up a couple of points, and I'm in support of this recommendation. However, some of the work you've done through near the charter school and on David Avenue, that was quite a disaster, and compliment to yourself and the Public Works for getting David Avenue completely straightened out, along with a couple of other streets in Del Monte Park. I want to say Funston and Shafter, but that shows the positive, and I'm sure they're now 100%. Anyway, I'm ready to make a motion.
Please.
Okay. I'll make a motion to authorize the agreement with the mayor, police engineer for the year 23-24 street rehab project on segments of Locust, Willow, Wood, Grand, and Pearl Street in the amount not to exceed $1,657,025 plus a 15% contingency.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 502. On to item 12C. Taxpayer
Yes, Mr.
protection.
Mayor, and the subject is initiative number 21-0042A1. It's also known as Initiative 1935. The Taxpayers Protection and Government Accountability Act. I want to note that about a month ago, the council asked that staff take a look at this initiative and determine what, if any, impacts might be made to the city if the initiative were to pass. And this, by summary, the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act, as it's called, would revise the California Constitution with provisions that limit voters' authority and input, adopt new and stricter rules and guidelines for taxes and fees, and would make it much more difficult to raise local revenues. The proposition is supported by a number of taxpayer associations throughout the state. The measure is currently opposed by the League of California Cities and every other city council within the county of Monterey. I do want to say that, at least in my review of the measure as drafted, it seems extremely vague. And that seems to be a significant problem with making a ultimate determination as to how it would impact the city. In fact, from what I've read, it is quite likely that if it does pass, it would be the subject of much more litigation following the attempted implementation. Some of the key elements I've listed in the report, but I'll review with you, requires greater definitions and specificity for language in proposed ballot measures. Tax measures approved after January 1st, 2022 that do not comply with these new rules would be void unless rewritten and reenacted. Requires fees and charges paid for the use of local and state government property to be reasonable, but there is no definition within the initiative as to what reasonable is. Prohibits indexing for inflation when setting fees. This is problematic. Currently, when we set rates in accordance with 218, you are allowed to index for a projected inflationary change in costs. What that does allow you to do is to set those fees over a significant period of time. And as you've seen with the last 10 years, you haven't had to come back. Yes, you'll come back in 2025. But if this initiative goes forward and you're not allowed to index for those inflationary changes, then you'll have to go through that 218 process on a more frequent basis. It expressly prohibits local advisory measures which allow local voters to express a preference for how local general tax dollars should be spent. And how that works, I know that in some cities I've been with, there have been general tax adjustments, and there at times those tax measure adjustments on the ballot are accompanied with advisory ballot measures language as well that specifies how the voters want to spend that money. That would be precluded if this initiative succeeds. There are several other potential impacts. I did note in the staff report that I feel that there is a strong potential that the general tax that was approved to increase, half-cent sales tax that was increased back in April 2022 would most likely be rescinded. And it's my understanding from my review that this applies to taxes that do not meet the definition of the new requirements. And I'm almost certain that the definition is so detailed that it's unlikely that initiative would meet that requirement. And from what I've been able to see, that is special taxes as well as general tax measures. I do want to note that in terms of the report, I did make an error in citing the approval date as November of 2022. It was actually April of 2022. Based on that, on all of these factors, I'm recommending that the council join the other cities within Monterey County and oppose this tax measure as drafted. If the council decides to modify, to adopt the attached resolution of opposition, we would have to change the reflective date in the resolution as well to clarify the finding that the tax was actually approved on April 2022 and not November 2022. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you very much. Any public comment?
Mayor, no, yes, we do have two. Inga Lawrence and Doimer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I understand, but I would like the voters to decide, and I don't think the city has any business in making a resolution any more than on the war with Gaza and Israel. I really think that the city doesn't need to weigh in on this to let the voters decide. Thank you very much.
Marcia.
Thank you. I agree with Ms. Delmer. I think city council should choose not to do anything. That was one of the options. And let the voters decide. There aren't as many changes as League of Cal Cities would like you to believe. In fact, the main change would be local special tax increases presented by citizen initiatives. That one currently is a simple majority of voters, 50% plus one, and the proposed vote requirement would be 2/3 of voters. Secondly, and this is a state issue, state tax increases by state legislature. Currently, it's 2/3 legislative vote. The proposed vote requirement would be 2/3 legislative vote and a simple majority of voters. So I think the League of Cal Cities, which by the way, I've been reading various articles, seems to have lost its way over the years, and it no longer represents the best interests of taxpayers, but rather big government. And in fact, Cal Cities joins the big unions of big government in opposing this ballot measure, whose primary proponent is the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and other business and homeowners' interests. So I think the city should just not do anything, city council rather, and let the voters decide. This issue is going to, oral arguments are going to be heard by the California Supreme Court on May 8th, 9 a.m. So, you know, there's going to be a decision made by the Supreme Court on whether this can go forward. Interestingly enough, it is our governor and some Democrat legislators who are suing the Secretary of State for approving this ballot measure. So anyways, thank you very much.
No further hands are raised, Mayor.
Council discussion. Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Your Honor. I think I find myself aligned with the last two speakers from the public. I think there are some problems currently that this ballot measure is trying to address. For instance, the advisory vote on how monies would be spent. It has no authority, and it leads to a false representation of what actually is going to be done. So I think that's good that it's not going to allow advisory votes, because they basically provide an opportunity for propaganda and not actual, a fiscal analysis. The other thing is, a greater specificity on, these arguments in favor. When you see them on the ballot measure, for instance, the last one we adopted, Measure A, it says the sales tax revenue will help with repairing streets, sidewalks, maintaining city parks, facilities, and investing in our library and recreation programming. Motherhood and apple pie stuff, but basically the money that will be raised by that half-cent tax is going to go for salaries. So I think you do have to have greater specificity. And also I do not believe the clawback provision of this will affect Measure A. So I believe the voters should decide. I don't think we should get involved trying to put our thumb on the scale. And I don't think some of the allegations or some of the critiques of this initiative are actually true. I think it's just a rehash, quite frankly, of some of the limits that Prop 13 established decades ago. And that battle is still being fought. And Cal Cities is trying to get us to sign up for it. And quite frankly, my opinion of Cal Cities isn't too high. And there are a number of cities that feel the same way. City of Orange just pulled out. They're no longer a member of Cal Cities. And there are a few other cities in Southern California that have decided to, basically terminate their membership. So I'm not in favor of this resolution and I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
I'll offer a opposing view on this, and recognizing that that there are problems, there are issues, questions about this ballot initiative. Yes, and the Supreme Court will hear it. So we don't know where this is going. A lot of questions about how it would be implemented. But there is the possibility that if this was implemented, the recent sales tax 5-cent sales tax increase, which brings in $1.2 million, will be rolled back. And Mike, it was approved by the voters twice. I might add, 60% of the voters, right? A majority. And in one very plausible interpretation of this, that it would require a 2/3 majority vote to impose this tax, which means this one would fail. And so my concern is, okay, what services are we going to eliminate to save $1.2 million? And then the other question about will make it more difficult to raise our fees, which once a year we do, which is usually a cost of living allowance, right? And that will become much more difficult. So I don't know where this $1.2 million is that suddenly will evaporate and there'll be no impact on city government. Absolutely, there would be an impact. Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. As well stated, I'm going to have to side with you on this one. While I understand the there are viable arguments on the other side of this, there's no way that we can walk away from these revenues that we've created through the voters. And like the mayor said, what are we going to cut first? I don't want to have to cut anything. I think cities are now also facing the reality with rising costs in the state that needing to raise more revenue than ever before to meet their salary demands, to meet their infrastructure demands, which we've talked about tonight. And we have more that we want to do. We wish we had more people on the, in the staff doing road work and sidewalks and recreation and all the other things that we put at the top of our lists. So for those reasons, anything that could potentially imperil that. I can't, I would want to be proactive in supporting this resolution and tonight. So that's where I'm at with it.
Councilmember Emilio.
I agree with you, Mayor, and Mayor Pro Tem. But what's also very important about adopting this resolution is that League of California Cities, which represents I don't know how many cities in California, quite a few, because I've been to both leagues, and every other city council within the county of Monterey. So I agree with the adoption of the recommendation.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting because our vote on this won't affect taxpayers being able to have their own vote. And I kind of take it more as taking a stand on what we're concerned about. We have a lot of residents telling us that they're concerned about their rights as taxpayers being taken away. And I guess, and they're wanting us to fight more of the things. So I guess in some ways, in other ways that aren't necessarily in this report that I've understood about this, there are concerns for the impact it would have. So the question to me comes down to, do we as a city want to just make a statement that shows our concern about the potential impacts and not even to just our city and our measure, which it could potentially definitely have impact from what I've read and heard so far. But I guess my bigger concern is there seem to be things, as Mr. Pearl talked about, in there's a lack of specificity. And so I'm often concerned about things that pull things back that aren't clearly enough defined, that could lead to problems that are unintended. So I'm torn on it because I tend to listen to everybody's arguments, and I think there are good arguments on both sides. Mr. Paul, from your opinion, it sounds like the reason we're hearing it is because there is a concern about impacts it will have on cities, and so it's just kind of taking a stand on.
Yes, Councilmember McDonald, and I'll be the first to say, I think that it is not that well written. And that's part of the issue, because it actually makes it difficult to determine what those impacts will be. Ultimately, it'll probably depend on litigation that, if it passes, will settle what is actually implementable as far as the law is concerned. So that, I have a general concern that it would. Now, is that to say that something couldn't be better crafted? Absolutely. I think the point is well taken, though, that the Supreme Court may decide this one way or another. That's another point. And in fact, the fact that it's even going to the Supreme Court, I think raises certain questions. Anyway, so staff's recommendation remains the same.
Thank you for that. And I guess they're just, for me as well, a lot of red flags, but the biggest concern for me is it repeals taxes that voters have already voted for. So I think I would have less concern if it was a moving forward from here type of issue, but this is basically taking away things that the public's already decided on how they want to utilize their public funds. So yeah, for that reason, I guess I'm inclined to support just saying that as a city, we think it needs to come back better than it is here, that has more clarity and doesn't fall back to other things that the citizens have already decided that we would then potentially. I know that we can vote again, but there's an expense to doing that as well. So thank you for that, for bringing it forward.
Councilmember Cleddy.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I think it is important for a council to make informed statements, but I don't believe it's an informed statement to say that this ballot measure would claw back the voters' adoption of Measure A in April of 2022. There are a few ways you can put measures on the ballot. One of them is by the legislative agents, that's us. And by a 2/3 vote, we can put a ballot or a tax measure on the ballot, and it simply requires a majority vote, 50% plus one. special taxes are different. So a general tax goes into the general fund. A special tax goes into a unique fund that's going to be used for that purpose and that purpose alone. Special taxes require a 2/3 vote. And that's always been the case, but until recent litigation, I think one of the cases came out of San Francisco and came out of Upland as well. The language that was originally adopted said that citizens initiatives, it wasn't clear, citizens initiatives that put a tax measure on the ballot, it was assumed if it was a special tax, it would require a 2/3 vote as well. That was challenged. And the courts found no. The amendment to the Constitution talked about the legislative agency putting it on the ballot, not citizens. So their interpretation was it simply required a majority vote. That's what this initiative that we're talking about tonight is going to change. That's a loophole that's going to be closed. The closure is tax measures put on the ballot through citizens initiative. Measure A was not put on the ballot by citizens initiative. It was put on the ballot by this city council. So it does not apply. And I think it's unfortunate that we're going to vote based on some fear that I don't believe exists. So again, I won't be supporting.
I would say you said fear. I'll use the word risk. I just don't want to take the risk. Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
I'm going to move it over, Your Honor, the recommended action.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstained?
Go with abstain just because I feel like now I need more information.
All right, motion fails. 3, 1, 1, 2.
Motion fails. Oh,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Do you realize,
Yes, under the
can we
government,
vote again?
well, there could be another motion made, but the rule is that you need to have a majority of the body adopt resolution. Your body is 7, so that means that you need to have four votes.
Right.
And Councilmember Emilio.
I know Mayor Pro Tem said adopt the resolution, but I believe it needs to read adopt the resolution opposing initiative number 21-0042A1, the Taxpayer Protection and Accountability Act.
So we're getting now into the weeds on procedure, but in order to have a motion considered again by the council, it'd basically be a motion for reconsideration. And that would need to be made, could not be made by one of those that voted in favor of the motion. So the only one here that can make that motion would be Councilmember Coletti or Councilmember McDonald.
Councilmember McDonald.
So I have a point of clarification question. As an attorney, hopefully you can answer that. So if we're adopting a resolution, and this will be for me and for the public, what exactly does that resolution mean that we are adopting?
It demonstrates the council's position with respect to that ballot measure. Well, it's the council's position on the issue.
And to clarify from the city manager's perspective, the idea in this measure is to clarify the perspective that as a city, we don't support it. We have issues with maybe how it's written or in any way that it would have repercussions for the city that would be challenging.
Ultimately, you have to independently make your own decision based on the information that is presented to you.
And to clarify, we are not impacting in a way, okay, I shouldn't say that. We are impacting in the sense that as a body, we make a decision. And so therefore that kind of shows what as a council we support or don't support, but everybody still has their individual right to
Oh.
decide if they agree or disagree with council.
Absolutely.
So we're not really impacting individuals' rights so much as we're saying as a city, we're okay, then, so what is the motion to?
There'd be two motions. The first one would be, it's either you or Councilmember Coletti, would be able to make a motion to reconsider the resolution. So you make that motion. If that motion passes, then there would be a motion to approve or deny the resolution. So the initial motion is, if you're going to be the one making it, or whoever makes it, the two people closest to me, it would be a motion for reconsideration on the resolution.
Okay, so
I'll put you out of your misery. A motion for reconsideration, Your Honor.
Does that require a second?
Yes. Anybody can second.
I'll
the motion.
second it.
okay.
All right, so you need to take a vote on the motion for reconsideration.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 502.
So, so, so where we are now is that, the council may reconsider and, any of you, now could make a motion, to support the motion, support the resolution, to approve the resolution or to, not approve the resolution.
Move approval number 2. Second time around.
Okay, Smith first, Emilio second. All in favor?
I'd suggest a roll call.
Yeah, good. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Peak,
Aye.
Councilmember Emilio,
Aye.
Councilmember McDonald,
Aye.
and Councilmember Coletti.
No.
Motion carries 4-1-2.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 13A. Mr. Pearl.
Services Director, Assistant City Manager Tori Hannah will provide the staff report or introduce it.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, and members of the public. Each year, the city's annual financial statements are audited by an independent firm. In your agenda packet, there was a link to the city's annual comprehensive financial report, a copy of the Measure X audit, a single audit for federal funds. This special audit is required when the city expends more than $750,000 in federal expenditures. In this situation, it is ARPA funds. And we also have their overview or their agreed upon procedures for reviewing the calculation of our GAN limit. On all audits, the city received an unmodified opinion or a clean audit, which is the ideal response to receive on the report. A couple of points is that when reviewing the audited financial statements and looking specifically at the general fund, when we talk about the general fund from a budgetary perspective, we looked at the fund balance being $14.8 million for the fiscal year ending 22-23. The financial statements will show $15 million, and that is because some of the small funds that we call sub-funds when we create the budget, such as the Koo Estate donation and some of our other operating donations roll into that fund. So the 14.8 has been consistent with what we've been reporting. The $191,000 difference relates to those other funds that are consolidated into the general fund for financial statement purposes. One other point our auditor is going to bring up in addition to our financial report is that we did incorporate 3 prior period adjustments. And as you may recall, this is a new year with a new audit firm. And while these statements are typically presented in late December or early January, and changing to the new audit firm, there's additional time needed to test the financial statements. They have to become familiar with the city's accounting structure and also work to work in conjunction with us to compile their statements. And as part of this process and changing to a new audit firm, we found that there were a couple of items that we needed to change the presentation of them. This has resulted in 3 prior period adjustments. These are a change in accounting practice, and they do not represent a change in what we've always reported as an available fund balance. One is an allocation of the OPEB liability from the general fund, also to allocate that amount to the enterprise and internal service funds. And another entry is there are some loans receivable that we have within some of our housing loans funds. And there is an account that we use to offset that, which is called unearned revenue historically. And I went back to 2012 to check on this, and we have been carrying it that way for this period. And what it basically does is show that the funds are unavailable for expenditure, that we don't have the $2 million available to spend. But technically, that is not the appropriate way to handle those. We talked about a couple of instances. Can we list it as non-spendable? Can we treat it as something else to offset it as like a deferred inflow to show the unavailability of these funds? But there isn't clear guidance that would say you can do this. It says it should be treated as a restricted fund balance. So in essence, those are the 2 changes that we made, as well as a change in the way that we handle our accrual for capital appreciation bond interest at year end. And I just wanted to clarify that, again, that these changes, although they resulted in a internal control weakness, they did not change the opinion of the auditors as far as fair presentation of our statements. And Mr. Delaney, which is here to present the report, we'll have more of information on that. And he will be providing an overview of the audit process and the financial statements. So with that, I will turn it over to him.
Okay, all right, thanks, Tori. Everyone can see my screen? All right. Okay. As Tori mentioned, my name is Coley Delaney. I am a partner with the Poon Group, and we are the city's new auditors. And I'm here to provide you with the result of our 2023 fiscal year 2023 audit. I'm going to go over scope of work, some required communication by generally accepted auditing standards, the breakdown of audit responsibilities, kind of a brief overview of the financial statements, and then I will give you our audit results. So as far as the scope of work, again, Tori already mentioned some of this, but we did audit the annual comprehensive financial report, the federal single audit, which we test compliance on each major program. There was 1 major program this year. We also offer in relation to the financial statement opinion on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. We also audited the Transportation Safety and Investment Plan account fund, so Measure X. And on this financial statement, we do issue a financial statement opinion as well as a compliance opinion with Transportation Agency for Monterey County Ordinance 2019-01. And we also did agreed upon procedures on the 2024 appropriations limit. So here's some required communications as required by generally accepted auditing standards. So starting with independence, the Poon Group, the firm, complied with all relative requirements regarding independence, and this includes both the firm as a whole and at the individual level for anybody who was working on the engagement. For the significant accounting policies, the city disclosed all significant accounting policies in Note 1 of the basic finance, or in Note 1 of the financial statements. This year, the city did implement GASB statement number 96 called subscription-based IT arrangements. It did have a moderate effect on the city's financial statements. And there are some significant estimates included in the financial statements. These can be fair value on investments, the depreciation and amortization on capital and right to use assets, so like useful lives and depreciation or amortization method.
There was a estimate used on the valuation for available for sale assets. And those include water entitlements that were initially valued at a local market rate. There's also continuing on the significant estimates, net pension liability and OPEB liability actuarial inputs include things like these are actuarially determined, include things like the discount rate, inflation estimates, COLA estimates, mortality rates, etc. As far as sensitive disclosures in the financial statements, these are ones that we kind of want to point out that if you're not going to read every single disclosure, we kind of want to point you towards these ones. So note 1, again, as I mentioned, summary of significant accounting policies. Note 6 for those available for sale assets. Note 11 and actually 12 talk about pension and OPEB. Note 14 discloses fund balance and excess expenditures over appropriations, things like that. And as Corey already mentioned, there is note 16 in the financial statements for prior period adjustments. And again, those were certain adjustments that were made to the beginning balances. So this essentially the 7/1/2022 balances, both at the government-wide and fund levels. And I'll kind of get into some of those a little bit later. But Tori already sort of mentioned what those things were related to: an allocation of OPEB liability, removing some unearned revenue balances that were incorrect, and adjusting interest payable. Again, as she mentioned, these prior period adjustments did result in what we considered a finding this year, which was a finding on internal control over financial reporting. However, we did correct the treatment this year, and we're not anticipating a finding for that moving forward. That being said, there were no uncorrected misstatements. So anything that we saw that was misstated, we did make sure that was corrected. And then, no consultations regarding audit results. We encountered no significant difficulties in dealing with management, and we didn't have any disagreements with management in terms of accounting treatments or audit procedures performed. So as far as audit responsibilities, I'll start with management's responsibilities. Management is responsible for the financial statements. They're responsible for presenting those financial statements in accordance with US GAAP. They're responsible for adopting sound accounting policies, establishing and maintaining internal controls over financial reporting and compliance, providing the auditors with evidence supporting the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements, and preventing and detecting fraud. As the auditors, our responsibility is to form and express an opinion about whether these financial statements are materially fairly stated in accordance with US GAAP. We do plan to perform the audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. And we are also required to consider internal control over financial reporting. However, we do not offer an opinion on these cities' internal controls. These our evaluation of the control and the controls in place in the control environment are for our risk assessment purposes, and so we don't provide any assurance on those. All right, so I'll get into the financial statement, and what I'll start here with is a condensed statement of net position. This is for the governmental activities on the government-wide statement. This is comparing June 30, 2023 and 2022 numbers. So 2022 numbers have been certain ones have been restated due to that prior period adjustment that I mentioned earlier. So on the asset side, cash and investments increased by about approximately $4.5 million. Remainder of the current assets are relatively static, and as well as the non-current capital assets. Deferred outflows related to pensions increased from $9 million in 2022 to $20 million in 2023. And this was mainly due to the difference between projected and actual earnings on plan investments that was realized by CalPERS. So these went from a $22.7 million deferred inflow in 2022 to an $8.7 million deferred outflow. So there's a big swing in those. Current liabilities did not see a significant change from last year. Non-current liabilities increased $17 million, and this was mainly due to a large increase in the net pension liability, which jumped from $31 million to $50 million in 2023. The deferred inflows, kind of the opposite effect of what I mentioned previously for the deferred outflows. Again, those related to pension, we're having a big effect on the numbers this year. decreased from 25.5 million in 2022 to down to 4.3 million in 2023, again, due to CalPERS earnings on plan investments. Total net position for the governmental activities increased by $19.7 million in 2023. So similarly, this is from the government-wide statement. This is a condensed, essentially, balance sheet for the city's business type activities. Cash and investments increased about 2.3 million. Rest of the assets relatively static. Deferred outflows and inflows again saw some swings related to similarly to the governmental activities for pension. And overall net position for the business type activities increased by a little over $2 million. All right, so here we have the government-wide governmental activities. Again, this is the statement of activities. So again, comparing 2023 and 2022. For this format, we sort of start with expenses and go from there. I will point out, you see these blue numbers here highlighted, our net cost of services. These numbers will come up on a subsequent slide. So just kind of wanted to point out where you see them here. But so expenses decreased across the board due to the fact that the city recognized pension expense this year pension expense in 2022 was $13.9 million. But in 2023, the city actually recognized pension income of $7.7 million. And that is where we're seeing a big change in the expenses, and pension income is actually treated for financial reporting as a negative expense. The revenue side is pretty similar to 2022, but with taxes increasing by $2.4 million, and the change in net position for the governmental activities is $19.7 million this year versus a $3.4 million loss in 2022. Again, government-wide, looking at the income statement, this is for the business type activities. The expenses for the business type activities were down in 2023, again, largely due to the pension expense thing that I previously mentioned, while charges for services increased slightly. And ultimately, you see a positive change in net position of a little over 2 million compared to 1.3 million in 2022. This is the general fund, condensed balance sheets comparing 2023 and 2022. Cash increased by $2.7 million. Total fund balance increased by $2.8 million. And then so when we take assets minus the liabilities and minus deferred inflows of resources, leaves us with fund balance, most of which is in the unassigned category and is available for future use and spending. Here is the general fund income statement, condensed again, but comparing 2023 and 2022. Revenues increased 3.9 million. Expenses also increased 3.4 million. You'll see in other category there, in the other financing sources and uses, and small number there, but that's related to proceeds. We consider other financing sources, essentially from GASB 87 and GASB 96 implementations and stuff. So just a minor thing there. Total change in fund balance was $2.8 million positive this year versus 2.2 million in 2022. So as Tori mentioned, we did do some prior period adjustments. This is what the prior period adjustments look like as the on the government-wide statements. So net position in total, after moving some of these things around, did actually increase at the government-wide level by $643,000. At the fund financial statement level, these were the funds that were affected that did have to do prior period adjustments at the fund level. Again, at this level, an additional prior period adjustment was necessary to, as Tori previously mentioned, to remove the unearned revenue related to loans receivable. And that was mainly in these housing funds, CDBG, CalHome, and housing. But that adjustment did not affect the government-wide statements. We did not make a prior period did not have to make a prior period adjustment for the earned revenue on the government-wide statements. All right, so I mentioned those blue numbers before. Here's kind of just one of our ratios that we like to look at. This is in the governmental activities on the government-wide statements, the ratio of tax revenues to net cost of services. And we're looking at the governmental activities because we do know that a lot of the governmental activities, general government, public safety, library, et cetera, are not really supported by costs, by charges to users. They're more supported by tax revenues. So in this scenario, or in this ratio, a ratio above 100% is good. What this means is that the tax revenues are sufficient to cover the net cost of providing services without dipping into net position or relying on investment earnings or miscellaneous income. And the net cost of providing these services is what we get after we do take certain charges for services and subtract operating grants and capital. Charges for services plus operating grants and capital contributions, and then subtract expenses. So as you can see in 2022, tax revenues were not sufficient to cover the net cost of services. They were $3.8 million short. But in 2023, the tax revenues were more than sufficient to cover the net cost of services. Again, this was mainly due to effects that the city saw on their expense side from their pension calipers. This slide shows the ratio of unassigned fund balance to annual expenditures in the general fund. So as you can see, the unassigned fund balance in the general fund this year was $15 million, up against annual expenditures of almost 29 million. So that ratio is roughly similar, but a little increased from last year. And what that essentially means is that sitting in the general fund's unassigned fund balance, you have about 6 months worth of expenditures, which I think it exceeds the city's target and is a healthy place to be. All right, as far as audit results, we did for the annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR, as already mentioned already, we did offer unmodified opinions to all opinion units. And so what our opinion units are in this report are the governmental activities on their own, the business type activities on their own. Each major fund is their own opinion unit, and then the remainder of the funds are called the aggregate remaining fund information, and those are an additional opinion unit. So what unmodified means here is that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. The accounting policies have been consistently applied. Estimates used are reasonable. Disclosures are properly reflected. However, as previously mentioned, we did include that one finding for the prior period adjustments. For the federal single audit, again, single audit it is triggered when the city expends over $750,000 in federal funds in any given year. We had no findings noted, and so that was in internal control over compliance and for major program compliance. Again, as Tori mentioned, the city had one federal grant in 2023. It was a coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery fund from the Department of Treasury, and that being the city's only grant, that was the major program that we tested. So we did actually test 100% of the grants on the CEPA. For the Measure X fund, we also issued an unmodified opinion, and that was we had no findings in internal control over financial reporting or compliance with the ordinance. We also performed agreed upon procedures on the 2024 GAN appropriations limit, and that limit is $47.6 million. Was calculated correctly, so no findings were noted. And we had no disagreements with management. There were no accounting issues ultimately, where there was a question on authoritative guidance, and no inappropriate activities were noted. And with that, that concludes my presentation. I'll open it up to questions if you have any.
Do you have any public comment?
I don't see any hands raised virtually, Mr. Mayor.
All right, that was a lot of numbers, very quickly described. Council discussion. Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you for the slides and the presentation. Mr. Delaney, I guess the first question I've got is on the timing that we received the report. My guess is, and based on what Ms. Hannah said is that a lot of it was just getting that data to you. And that may be, because normally we receive this report in January. So I'm guessing maybe next year, now that everything's kind of pipelined and we know, yeah, we've got you and I do, by the way, I love to see, that there's 10 years worth of data in most of the categories. So that's obviously a lot of data to download. So what are your expectations for next year?
Yeah, I think, next year will be significantly easier. There's a lot of sort of efficiencies that are going to be gained moving forward. First year audit is always very tough for both on the audit side and on the client side, as we need to basically collect information, tons of information about the city and how they process transactions and basically everything. And also, building the financial statements and that sort of stuff does take time, but we have to train our systems for the city's general ledger accounts and all that stuff and map those things to the financial statements and all that. And so all that stuff, the real sort of heavy lifting has been done. So a lot of that stuff will be automated next year. And so that will save significant time. And we're also not anticipating, at least in regards to the finding that we had this year, anticipating that to recur. And so, but when there are findings, that kind of lengthens some of the process as well, as far as digging out what the issues are, discussing the issues, consulting on the issues, going back to authoritative guidance and all that stuff, and then coming up with the city's response to those findings and corrective action plan and all that sort of stuff. So next year should be, I think that we'll be back on the city's normal timeline.
That's great. I appreciate the update. I guess the thing that jumped out for me is this apparent net increase in pension liability. Some of the details escape me, so I'm going to have to ask you maybe to explain it a little bit more. So my understanding is our unfunded liability payments went up significantly, or is this some other cost that? Why don't you explain that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So essentially, what you're looking at is, as far as the stuff that that the city is concerned with on an annual basis, is what is their contribution percentage, what are the contribution percentage is going to be, because that's what really affects your budget and all that. The rest of the stuff, when we bring in the net pension liability and the related deferred inflows and outflows, those are really kind of accounting entries that do ultimately on the government-wide statements, which is a full accrual statement, they do really affect what you would be recording as far as expenses and things like that. But it doesn't actually affect, it didn't affect your contributions, the city's contributions this year. And actually, with the net pension liability, it had actually gone down quite a bit in last year, due to CalPERS had like a 20% return year. And so you see some of these things, when things happen at CalPERS, they sort of take a year or two to trickle down to see on the city's financial statements. So actually, the city's funded percentages and things are actually kind of more in line this year with their historical numbers than they were last year, when last year the funded percentages I think jumped up, and so now they're just kind of back down to where they were.
So does this represent more of a projection then? There's this delta between the discount rate from last year to this year, and that drives this net pension liability. But are these just virtual numbers, or how does this actually?
Well, I mean, I did mention significant estimates used in the financial statements earlier, and two of your largest numbers that you're going to, certainly one of the largest numbers that you're going to have on your financial statements is that net pension liability, and that is when everything, when we boil it down, that is an estimate. However, it's an actuarial estimate, based on, data from CalPERS and whatnot. But those things, depending on what their actual experience is, if they change assumptions and stuff like that, it can vary widely. And we do actually have a footnote. Actually, there's a table in the, and I won't direct you to it, I don't have it in front of me right now, but in the pension footnote there, which I believe was note 11, there is a table in there that basically it exists just to kind of show the reader what the potential swings in the liability, how the liability could be affected based on a plus or minus 1% change in the discount rate that the actuaries use. Now we're not anticipating big swings, but if for instance, if that discount rate was dropped from 6.9 to 5.9%, the city's liability as present, with all things being equal, would be would shoot up quite a bit, and vice versa. But I think CalPERS is going to be raising the discount rate anytime soon. But yeah, it is kind of the nature of it. You will see some swings from time to time. The actuaries try to smooth these swings out as best they can. But you will still kind of see some fluctuations from year to year, especially when one year CalPERS realizes about 20% return positive, and then the following year it's negative 7%. So that's a really big change there from year to year that does affect the city's numbers.
Right, and CalPERS does smooth out the UAL, as I understand it. So, okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Luke already asked that question, but I wanted to hear that answer. How I can't recall the exact phrasing of it, but our expense ratio, it actually looks like it's better this year, right, than it was last year. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, which ratio are you referring to?
It was kind of toward the end of the presentation.
Okay, yeah, I mean, as far as the two ratios that I did show, which was the tax revenues to net cost of services, and the unassigned fund balance in the general fund to the annual expenditures, yeah, those have both improved since last year. The first one, the net cost of services to tax revenues, improved greatly, and that was again due to some of these like pension changes in the pension expense. But on the general fund side, it did improve, but you're still right around 6 months worth of expenditures in the unassigned fund balance in the general fund.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the bottom line is we're somewhat subject to market factors, like everybody else in the world. But I would say that I actually want to ask you, it looks like it's a fairly good report overall as far as the city's financial controls and the city's financial health. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, so I mean, what first I will add the caveat that we do not opine on the city's financial health. So that being said, from some of the numbers that we did look at, I would say that there isn't cause for alarm or a going concern issue or anything like that that the city's facing. And really we did the finding for the prior period adjustment, and that was just essentially kind of a change in accounting treatment, a change to the correct accounting treatment. But again, that kind of one-off aside, which is when you get new auditors in, they look at things a little different. Look at things a little. They might look at different things than some of the than the prior ones. But otherwise, out of those sort of one-off issues, we did not really notice anything as far as like control deficiencies, significant or material weaknesses that outside of just these prior period adjustments that we needed to make that we felt we needed to communicate to management or to council.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate the report.
I want, first I want to thank Ms. Hannah and her team for helping to do this audit along with Pun Group, Mr. Delaney. I know it's, I can only imagine it's a lot of work. Next year, I guess we will not have a federal single audit anymore because we don't meet that. We're not having those funds. Is that right?
I believe we may still have some significant ARPA funds to spend in this year. So I believe we will be having to have a single
Work
audit.
will continue. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you very much for all the efforts in doing this report. And like Mayor Pro Tem Smith said, my impression is this is absolutely good news. The unfunded pension liability notwithstanding, everything else is really good news. And in spite of having to restate some accounting, and just great to have a general fund unassigned fund balance of $15 million at the end of the last fiscal year. 50%, a little over 50% of our general fund. So like the sound of that. Thank you all. Mayor, yeah. Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you, Mayor. I occur with the Mayor Pro Tem and the mayor in regards to they said it's just there wasn't any red flags, and it was a compliment to you, Ms. Hannah, and your team, just like the others said too, and I really appreciate it. And we are in our reserves, the most I've ever seen in 5 years. So,
Yeah. All right. Councilmember McDonald.
Thanks. I'll just add, yeah, it's nice to know too that, it always makes sense to try different firms. So they may look at things like we're finding a little differently, maybe report something a little differently. Maybe they find something that others didn't catch. And so the fact and the transition of all that, everything still looks so great. We greatly appreciate our finance team for keeping us good in the books. Thanks.
I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll just move that we receive all these reports since there's so many of them. They're numerous.
I
Okay.
guess that'll be a
guess that's
second.
it.
Yeah.
Read the report.
Receive, yeah.
Not needed.
No,
Luke's
we're not
shaking his
gonna
head. We're
take
not
a
gonna
vote.
take a motion.
It said recommended action, receive the report. Well,
Withdraw.
that's already happened. All right. With that, it's after 8 o'clock. So let's take a break. I think, do we have refreshments? Thank you very much for making the arrangements. We're going to take a 15-minute break and let's reconvene at 8:30. And we're celebrating Mr. Peralt's bittersweet last time with us tonight.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Mohammed and Tori will introduce this item. And Tom Jacobson is going to make the actual presentation, I think, correct?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. As we know, we've been experiencing occasional disruptions to our public meetings and operations due to technology-related outages. And the majority were due to component failures within our IT infrastructure. So to reduce downtime caused by such outages and improve the availability of our IT systems and services, and upon direction from our former city manager, we contracted with Client First Technology Consulting Group and initiated the IT Infrastructure High Availability Assessment Project in the latter part of last year. Over the past few months, the consultant collaborated with the staff and conducted the assessment. The assessment report and presentation includes findings, recommendations for improvements, and budgetary estimates for implementing those recommendations. We have Tom Jacobson from Client First with us on Zoom, and he'll be giving you the presentation. And with that, I'll pass it to Tom.
Alrighty, I'll share my screen here and then we'll get started. Let me. Can you see my screen here? Are we good? There we go. My name is Tom Jacobson. I'm a senior partner with Client First Technology Consulting. And a little bit about myself. I've been in the IT business for over 40 years. I did my first local government project in 1999, where I failed to get dual monitors approved at a city council meeting. Here are some of the firm's California clients. Near you, many in the Bay Area, and Salinas is a client, South San Francisco, Piedmont, several others. Scope of the project is to assess the Pacific Grove's IT infrastructure with specific focus on high availability services, i.e. making sure everything works as much of the time as we can possibly make it. We provided recommendations to increase availability of technology services using two basic levels that are industry standard. One is enterprise grade availability, which is approximately 1 hour of downtime per year, which is what most municipalities use as a base level. And the second is utility grade availability, which is 5 minutes of downtime a year, which is typically used for public safety, electric utilities, and water utilities. Our areas of focus were where there were failures in recent past, the police department, council chambers AV, the library, and city hall systems.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yeah,
your presentation is not advancing if you've started that already.
okay. Yep, I did start advancing. Let me try again then.
Thank you.
Can you see the slide that says assess IT infrastructure?
We're looking at scope and methodology. There we go. Project scope.
Yeah, okay. Let me just do it this way then. You don't mind? This is the slide I just talked to. we looked at two different levels of service. One is enterprise grade availability, which is approximately 1 hour of downtime a year. The second, utility grade, which is typically used for public safety and electric and water utilities. Our areas of focus were police, council chambers, library, and city hall systems. Do my slide forward okay this time?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Our methodology was to review IT documentation, interview the IT staff, discuss recent downtime events, discuss initial ideas for improvement, evaluate all the components of the network infrastructure from the plugs in the wall to the internet connection. We interviewed the departments to gather their requirements, and we drafted a detailed report. We had workshops with IT and city manager, and then we prepared the summary report for delivery to you today. Key findings, IT staff are working hard to improve the infrastructure, but they're very busy just keeping the wheels on, keeping day-to-day things working, and with increased cybersecurity demands, keeping the city safe. Best practices redundancies are not in place, hence the need for this study. Several projects are started and not quite finished at the time of this report. Finishing those projects are included in the project budgets that we've developed. And in some cases, third-party subject matter expertise will speed implementation and provide much needed relief from the burden of some of these projects. The budgets include hardware, that I'll talk about later, include hardware, software, and third-party assistance. Okay, key findings are in order of importance based on our years of experience. First key finding is internet reliability. And I would say we have, right now, approximately 50 local government clients. Just this week, on Monday, we had a client with a 7-hour outage during the day. Today, we had a client with a 5-hour outage for their connections to their police vehicles. Internet outages are the #1 point of failure in local government. The peninsula has limited points of fiber access. And so what we recommend is actually Starlink backup, which is satellite backup for City Hall, the police department, and the library. This is a relatively inexpensive solution and gets you off of the ground, which would help in the event of an earthquake. Staff have some complaints about slow internet access. So we recommend looking at upgrading internet speeds and then making the speeds of the internet connections at City Hall and the police department equal. The actual equipment that connects to the internet, the firewalls and switches, are not fully redundant. This is a best practice in local government. Some of the equipment's been purchased but not yet installed. So we recommend making the firewalls and core switches in redundant pairs. So if one should fail, the second would take over. Backups and disaster recovery planning. Not all city data is backed up currently. Some of the areas that could use additional backups are some cloud-based services, the geographic information system in use by the city, and Office 365. The goal of the current goal, which has changed a lot in the last couple of years, is now a cloud-based restoration of key city services in less than 4 hours. So that's really where we want to go. And I'll have a slide later on that talks a little bit about how that all looks when you put it together. But backups are the #1 defense for cybersecurity attacks and for any failures of hardware. So this is why it's #2 on our list. Networks and servers, which is the equipment that actually drives the applications that Ms. Hannah uses for financials and those kinds of things. The core switches, as we talked about, should be redundant, and then building resilient server infrastructures for both City Hall and police is recommended. At City Hall, a second server's already been purchased, but there's enough equipment there that makes 3 servers acting as a cluster at the appropriate solution. And then for police, they actually have a smaller on-site presence, and they just need a second server to be a failover server in case the first one fails. For utility grade redundancy, we'd recommend copying the City Hall systems over to police and the police systems over to City Hall. But that's really only done for a minority of our clients and the larger ones at that. Council chambers audio visual, which is one of the key drivers of this report, is next on the list. Some basic improvements related to equipment reliability, which would be air conditioning for the AV room, where all the equipment sits, will extend the life and reduce the likelihood of outages. Some review of actual how power is distributed to make sure it's all on UPS power. There's a discussion about that a little bit later in this report. There's a noisy switch on the clerk's desk that should be moved, and then some internet slowness. Now, for utility grade redundancy, redundant equipment and then redundant AV equipment would be recommended. And again, this is actually not something that's very regularly done in local government. Most folks will kind of almost live or die by their AV equipment because it's very expensive. A complete AV system redundancy would be in the 6 figures range. This is a slide that covers backups and disaster recovery. Good thing that the city has is fiber between the City Hall computer room and the police computer room, which makes resiliency between the 2 systems easy to implement and manage. And then all systems go up to the cloud, and that's where Office 365, the city's email system is. And then we recommend an email archive system and business continuity and backups for cloud systems too. So the city knows that the city's data, whether it's actually managed by the city or managed by a third party, the data the city owns is backed up and secure. Okay. The picture on this is the police department computer room. There's a few necessary improvements in the computer room, but the cabling in this building should be reviewed, and at minimum, the cabling in the computer room should be improved and tidied up, and labeling improved, and it'll help with any outages, finding what's wrong, and actually probably reduce outages too. A good thing is security event and incident management system has been implemented. It's been implemented for some basic system logs. We'd like to see that implementation expanded to cover all logs. These systems help with early notification of cybersecurity events, and in some cases, they can self-remediate events. They're very important and are recommended and are key actually to keeping cybersecurity insurance costs low. Next on the list is network management software, which is another early warning and detection methodology. Helps to move IT from a reactive to a proactive posture. We recommend using a third party to help implement these. These are tough for the IT team to get to. They're relatively time intensive to implement initially, and relatively easy to maintain over time. So that's one of the reasons we're in the state, is because they do take time to implement and get running appropriately. Because you have to fine tune the alerts and alarms and things like that. Okay, we talked a little bit about electronic power distribution. On the right is a graph that outlines best practice for power distribution. It's one plug in the wall, second plug in a UPS. That way, if the UPS fails, system continues to run. And then the final finding is the phone system lacked appropriate failover. The staff had identified many of these issues, and they've worked through the majority of them. One of the things that happened in the fire over at Public Works is it destroyed a phone controller when that was in that building. And when the system was rebuilt, it was attached to the City Hall phone system. This staff decided is not a major issue, and a couple of red phones are sufficient as backup. Project budget. To do, this is a 5-year budget, and for each year, it's separated between what would be an enterprise grade solution versus a utility grade solution. And the costs are summarized separately below. So over 5 years, about you know, an average of $200,000 a year if you were to do it that way, to get to enterprise grade implementation of the recommendations included in this report. A utility grade implementation is about a third more, or another $500,000. These recommendations can be implemented, you know, one at a time. There's no real need to implement all of them at once. Can pick them in priority order, or staff can pick and choose, however, whatever's going to work best for the team. And then questions?
Do we have public comment? Anyone wishing to speak?
I'll be online, sir.
All right, council discussion. Well, then I'll start off. Thank you very much. Thank you for our IT staff, Mohammed, as well as Client First for the review. Obviously, it took the efforts of the entire staff to provide information to Client First for this assessment. So really appreciate seeing a whole enterprise, as you said, organization assessment of IT. It's so integral for city government to work well. So I agree with the comments about the priorities. Internet outages certainly are a major priority, and cybersecurity, and so cloud backups, redundancy. I would not be happy. I don't think any of us would be happy to see Pacific Grove in a newspaper article that says we're being held ransom by some outfit that has hacked into our system. So, yeah. I had a question about all the equipment. Is if you buy equipment and you stage this over a few years, I'm just worried about the compatibility of equipment bought at different years. I suppose that, is that an issue?
Generally not, because the refresh cycle for different equipment has different categories. And generally the equipment would be refreshed. So they're not going to be too old. They're going to be relatively new. So for instance, the switches would be replaced every 7 years, and the servers would be refreshed every 4 years. So they're not going to be too far apart.
Okay, and so they would be compatible with each other over their lifespan.
Right. That's the idea with upgrading the equipment in a timely manner.
And aside from just equipment, is there any other physical work, recabling? Wasn't there work done recabling this room? And there any building modifications that also need to occur?
Right. The cabling needs to meet the current standards. And fortunately, the cabling that we have in the city hall, our locations, is relatively newer standard. And so we don't need to worry, in my opinion, we don't need to worry about cabling for the next 5 or so years. They're relatively new. But the cabling project was done prior to my time with the city.
Mm-hmm. And last question. So you'll be assessing what needs to go, obviously the highest priority for the next year fiscal budget.
Right, so we would be assessing, evaluating the information and the report, and we would be prioritizing based on the budget and other factors. Like which item to prioritize most, the internet versus, depending on how much budget funds we have, how much could be allocated within the given fiscal year.
I guess it wasn't my last question. So I think $200,000 per year number stuck in my head from Mr. Jacobson's presentation. Is that about right for the order of magnitude of?
I believe that is correct. I think some years might have been 250, up to 250,000. We did place some preliminary numbers in the budget for some, but not all of these. We wanted to first get council's feedback and how receptive they were of these recommendations before we built any significant amounts in, but we did put some placeholders in and we reviewed that with the interim city manager.
Well, maybe to partially answer that question, everybody uses a computer now to work. So we need a good operating system for the organization to be effective. So thank you for doing the study. Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you, Mayor. So the question for Tom, if you don't mind me calling you Tom, it sounds like you've worked with a lot of cities, and I know you're talking about City Pacific Grove, but have you had other cities that cybersecurity got into and caused the computers to go haywire? I have another question.
The answer is yes. We've been involved in other instances and we've been called in to assist in remediation in other cases.
I see. And then do you, it sounds like this situation, I guess I could ask Mohammed or you, it sounds like it's going to be the hopefully solve any issues, technology, and you guys do a great job on that. The other thing, Tom, I had a question of, and I know probably this is the answer, I'm probably going to answer it myself, but what about people calling in? I guess you can't probably cause a problem. I mean, when people call in, we had an issue with people calling in with all kinds of racist comments. I mean, we're not the only city that happened to, but there's a way, I know this is impossible, but is there a way of blocking the comments other than when they call in?
No, actually, we were asked that question in a little bit of a different way by a police department earlier this month, and there are no technologies available to help block those types of calls. The phone system the city does have the availability to record those types of messages, and but they're very difficult to trace. So you can record them, hand them over to police, and ask them to do some research. But odds of resolving those issues with technologies are very low.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thanks for the report and staff and Mr. Jacobson. I think I'm glad that we're doing this type of analysis because we're trying to protect our internet resources, which is obviously super important. I mean, when you're at the office and the internet shuts down, pretty much everything just comes to a grinding halt. So I'm glad that you are working on that for the city of Pacific Grove, and I appreciate it. And putting us in the best position possible to have backups, redundancies and all that. So I think it's really important in this day and age. This is, we all work, like the mayor said, when I go to work, I plug my computer in, I start typing. So we'll just keep it rolling for the city of PG. Thank you.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, and I would actually chime in too, especially since, thank you, Tori, for mentioning that the idea is to find out what we think is important to keep in the budget, because like the mayor pointed out, I think having internet accessibility, I mean, we're a world that's not going backwards. You can't really survive in this day and age without technology for too long. So I think that that's really important, because as a government entity, I think we also have a responsibility to protect our assets. And so I think that cybersecurity with the backups and the redundancies is really a critical item. So I would think that would be something we would need to find a way to make sure we're including in the budget. And the one thing I did have a question about, so obviously utility grade goes way up, and it sounds like, if I understood right, the utility grade would be important for the police department because their emergency response and fire, I would presume, probably not for the whole city. So is part of the plan going forward to go with probably the recommended project, which actually that in and of itself doesn't seem terribly expensive and seems like just the cost of doing business as a city entity. But will there be some of the utility grade implementations that would be particularly recommended that you guys will bring forward to us, so we can kind of look at what are the most important ones to implement, basically that would give us the most bang for our buck in regards to like security and protections for keeping us online?
Yes, I think the plan is that we would evaluate each of those recommendations in terms of how we want to prioritize them. I think part of the thing that we have grappled with in the past few years, outages to our public meetings. So that's going to be a critical thing, and the internet redundancies with the internet is a priority. So, and then one thing I would like to mention, that this assessment and the recommendations, proposals in this report are addressing the core of the IT infrastructure, not every single element of it. Right. So, and that benefits all of the city locations, but primarily we were prioritizing City Hall and Police Department.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing this forward, because I think this is timely and very important. So I think it's important that we're proactive in it as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Clooney.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, it is interesting to have read through this report and to see the assessment and that picture of the rat's nest. I thought that was something you pulled off the net as a worst case example.
No,
It's in our own
I've seen worse.
I guess to move forward, I would like to see kind of a master plan that has focused objectives and not try to do this piecemeal. I know that's kind of contemplated in providing a 5-year schedule, but I think we basically before us tonight have this menu of options, and I'd like to see it focused down and know exactly what the key objectives are. You know, as far as power goes, and one of the notes that you have in your report mentions that we probably shouldn't be driving or powering our computer equipment off of a generator, just due to the noise. So it seems like we're going to have a pretty significant infrastructure installed to be, have power, backup power, because when power goes off in Pacific Grove, it can be for days. And UPS system typically isn't, at least that it would have to kind of time span.
If that's what was inferred, that's actually not what I meant. But I think I was talking about, maybe we're talking about in the City Hall computer room, there's a single power circuit that drives all the servers and network equipment in the City Hall computer room. So should that circuit trip, then, the entire City Hall computer room goes down. So one of the things we want to do is have 2 different circuits, and then use really, city power on one and then UPS power on the other. If it's all on generator, that's great. If the generator fails, that's just the price of doing business. So I'm a big fan of generators. And if I implied otherwise, I apologize.
Well, okay, appreciate that. I'm looking at in section 9, it says generators have been known to create power spikes and brownouts that decrease the life of attached equipment.
Oh,
And I guess
you know.
That's what I
Yeah,
was keen.
that means run things through UPS is fixed power spikes. So that's the point. Yeah.
Okay, so we put in some power line conditioning is what you're saying.
Yes. Yes. Mhm.
But still rely on the generator set we have on site to produce the backup power.
Correct. Mhm.
The other thing is, when most of the city's down, that it can include some of the, the internet service providers' equipment as well. So I did like seeing mention of a satellite link so that we do actually, even if we're powered, we may not be able to connect to the internet. So I did like seeing that mentioned. Someone mentioned cybersecurity. I think it was you, Mr. Jacobson, cybersecurity insurance. Do we have a policy for that? Does the city have something like that?
Councilmember Coletti, through the mayor, we do have some cybersecurity coverage. Our CJPIA offers higher levels of security, but we do have a standard coverage.
Okay. And maybe when this comes back, we could get it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just to that point, I'm thinking if we have to go to an insurance carrier, we've already lost the data. What we should be spending the money on is not losing the data. That's my
Sure. No, it's a
take on
good
it.
point. But you can also have, hardware go down as a result of being hacked as well.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
I just, knowing what that insurance policy is would be helpful and what it supplies. But I did see in your report mention of the use of VM software, and the mayor mentioned compatibility. And I think what I got out of his comment was that every time there's an upgrade in hardware and you're still using the same base software, the same server software, et cetera, with VMware, it's just a simple matter of copying over the VM. Is that correct? Is that how the city has implemented itself? Are we using VMware to run VMs, virtual machines for our server software, et cetera?
To a certain extent, yes, we do have a VMware virtual infrastructure for our servers. But I would say that to your comment on, the frequency of upgrades or updates to software components and hardware components, software components generally tend to have updates more frequently. And then we have a refresh cycle for hardware, upgrading the hardware. Generally, there isn't a big compatibility issue because, the hardware that's manufactured, the software vendors will need to make sure that, they follow certain standards to have it compatible.
Yeah, I guess it was the question of when you're doing the upgrade, if you have virtualized software through, something like VMware, it's easier to reinstall it. But I was just kind of kudos for doing that because that's, I kind of do the same for my own system at home. So I would love to see a master plan. It's expensive, but I guess the thing is you're going to have to tell us what the priorities are because I don't know what they are. And then if that master plan can be developed, it'd be good to see it approved.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think master plan it. We're doing that with a lot of things right now, but it's 15 million. We're not a bank, so we got to do things to protect the city. And this is I've said that many times before. We provide services, so let's provide some more services and make sure that we keep our staff online and all attendant individuals that work with us. Thank you.
There's one thing that I would like to add that in the budget section of the report, we did prioritize, the spendings, the expenditures, and each of the line items. You will see a small column that says priority high versus medium priority. Unfortunately, we have most of them are listed as high priority, and there are only a couple that are listed as medium ones. And then there's also for 5-year budget plan, the estimates. It's structured in such a way that higher priority items are put under year 1, and some of the lower priorities within the high priority sections are put within year 2, 3, or 4.
I'll just add, I like the idea about setting the objectives because, sort of ranking the objectives and you telling us what the priorities should be and then for us to have an discussion around that. So, anyhow, Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. And one other point, which I'm sure you're thinking about as well, is often spending, so the upfront expense will actually potentially save us a lot of money in the long term. So prioritizing things that may seem expensive, but it's more expensive to not fix them. I think that that's important. So I'm sure that that'll be part of it too. But any way that we can make that transparent so that it's easy to kind of in planning and budgeting like you're talking about. And so the public understands the reason for the expense is always great. Thanks so much.
Do you need anything else from council?
Excuse me, Mayor, I believe that should be sufficient for us to move forward. We will include some of the items within the budget and we will talk about how they're prioritized on the sheet and work with the interim or the new city manager on those.
That sounds great. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're on to item 13C.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to give you a brief introduction and then the Community Development Director will make the remainder of the presentation. As you know, that outside of the Planning Commission's permitting responsibility, a major responsibility that the Planning Commission has is making recommendations to the City Council relative to zoning, land use, advanced planning requirements or goals or regulations. And in the past, the way this has been done is that the Planning Commission has made a resolution of intent, and that typically would get passed along to the city manager, and then the city manager, using existing resources, would try and do what could be done to make sure that adequate staff and legal review were given on those recommended recommendations. But typically, you would not see them until you get an end product. This is a little change to that process in that the Planning Commission has done, made a series of recommendations regarding these three items. They were made in the individual resolutions of intent, but per my understanding of the role, these resolutions of intent should be reviewed at staff level, and that information together with the resolutions of intent should be passed along to the council, because ultimately it is the council that has to make the decision as to how we spend our resources and what our priorities should be. And then the council should feed that back to the manager, who will in turn direct the appropriate staff according to the direction provided by the council. So it's a bit different than the way we've done it in the past. With that, if there are any questions of me relative to that process, hearing none, we'll turn it over to the Community Development Director.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Peralt. Good evening, Mayor Peak and council members. I know we're getting a bit late, so I won't reiterate everything that was included in the agenda report. But as the city manager noted, the Planning Commission had voted to forward 3 resolutions of intention to begin some zoning text amendments. And what those resolutions are seeking is staff time and resources, both from community development staff as well as legal review, to begin these zoning text amendments pertaining to hotel parking, story poles, and then some various cleanup and interpretations. In the staff report, I did go over a number of the priorities that the Community Development Department is currently working on, and I know that you all are aware, very aware of the housing element update, the associated general plan updates and EIR. You're likely aware that we received a grant, I believe last year, from the Coastal Commission to do some coastal hazards assessment that will lead to some LCP amendments later this year. And then, of course, we're always under, state permit streamlining act and mandates for moving development applications forward in a timely manner. With the staff recommendation to not move forward with these particular zoning amendments at this time, it's mainly based on staff resources and other pressing priorities. And one thing that I could have probably done a better job of conveying in the staff report, but I'll do it now, is I want to make sure that the staff recommendation is not meant in any way to diminish or disregard the Planning Commission's work that they did on drafting these text amendments. The work won't be wasted. It's simply that we would set it aside for now while we're working through some other higher priority items. And my goal is that we would hopefully, when we get to the point of a completed and certified housing element, and my hope is that we move then into phase 2 of the general plan update for the remaining elements. And then there would be a subsequent fairly comprehensive zoning code overhaul that would happen at that time, because we would want the zoning code to implement the fully updated general plan. And my goal is that we would roll the Planning Commission's work on these text amendments into that larger zoning code overhaul that I'm hoping that we can do in the near future. But I just wanted to make sure that you understand, that the planning commissioners understand, and that the public understands that this isn't intended to disregard their work and not move it forward. It's just a matter of timing. I do know that we have the Planning Commission Chair, Don Murphy, here in the audience this evening, and I think he's wanting to give some remarks as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Let's go, thank you very much. So let's go out to public comment, and sure we'll have Chair Murphy come and engage with us as well and contribute to the discussion. Do we have any public comment? Looks like we do.
We do. Lisa Chiani?
Thank you. The city's planning commission takes their responsibilities very seriously to protect what makes PG the special community that it is. They've worked diligently to document problems in the city's zoning code, and it's unreasonable to propose a further blanket delay of these proposed amendments when they've already been delayed for so long. I believe CDD should work with the planning commissioners who worked hard on these amendments and plan a path forward step by step until we have sufficient staff and they're sufficiently trained to undertake all the amendments. Please request CDD collaboration with Planning Commission to map out a way forward and to start on at least one of the proposed amendments. Even a former city council acknowledged the problem with the inadequate hotel parking requirement of one parking space. Well, that was one parking space per 4 rooms was what it was when they reviewed the hotel plans in 2018 for Hotel Durrell across the street from the library and museum. I forget the name now. They requested design revisions for the project until major improvements were made, but they were stuck with the inadequate parking. Other priorities are cited in tonight's agenda report as to why these amendments should not move forward, but I don't find those priorities listed. I heard some of them now from Ms. Vaughn. The explanation for that for not changing the hotel parking requirement says it could create new non-conforming conditions for existing and approved hotels. And it's always been the case, as I understand it, that the zoning code that's in effect when project plans are deemed complete is what applies to any given project. So something coming along later like this is not going to change what's already underway. Please encourage CDD to start with one amendment mutually agreed upon between CDD and planning commissioners and commit to moving forward after that one is successfully tackled. We must not continue making the same mistakes over and over, and the city must start recognizing the positive, informed efforts of the volunteers who serve on our boards and commissions. Thank you.
Ada Lawrence and Dimer.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. This can has been kicked down the road so far by one director after another. The damage is already pretty much done, and it looks like they're just waiting to see if more damage can be done to our city. By not tackling these things, and especially the hotel parking, you've impacted staff and council has impacted our city beyond repair, I really think. And here we are just pushing it further and further away until, oh, maybe it'll just go away. Well, it's not going to, and it's a problem. And I'm with Lisa, just tackle one. Thank you very much.
No further hands are raised, Mr. Mayor.
Council discussion. Councilmember Coletti.
Thank you, Your Honor. I tend to agree with the two previous callers only because I've been watching Planning Commission for so long. And I mean, we're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years that some of these suggestions, some of these proposed amendments to our zoning code have been made, and nothing has happened. And it causes some real problems because we end up with projects that fully expose the inadequacies of the current code, and we say we're going to make the updates, but we never do. And I agree about the hotel parking. I mean, when that came up in the context of approving the Pacific Grove Hotel there on Grand, everyone said, well, let's get this resolved. The only reason not to do it, and it appears in the agenda report, is that it's going to create non-conforming uses, but that's okay. That nothing's wrong with that. The real question should be, is that code allowing 4 hotel rooms to 1 parking space, is that good code for Pacific Grove? And the Planning Commission and others feel like it's not. So I think we should look at that. We do tend to have kind of a reactive posture. And I think we need to be a little more forward looking, and we need to make it a priority to get some of these inadequacies in our code resolved. Condominium. We've had 2 condominiums sneak in that never got a use permit from the Planning Commission. But I do agree we should focus on one area. Some of the definitions, for instance, the council will remember when the question of appurtenances came up. And we discussed that. Well, one of the recommendations is to fix that. And it included elevator shafts. So if that was in our code, we wouldn't even had that discussion. And that's something that the Planning Commission is recommending. We should adopt it. So I'd like to see maybe a little more enthusiasm, perhaps. And I know there's a lot here to pick from, but I think some of these definitions could easily come before council for review. And I do appreciate the fact that the Planning Commission reached out through these resolutions to inform the council. That is their advisory. They do have an advisory role. They use those resolutions to realize that function, and I really appreciate it. So we need to do some of this. And I don't think we can sit here tonight and say what, But I'm kind of leaning more towards some of the definitions that have been suggested. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, you were talking about the LCP, and I remember 10 years ago sitting over here, Bill Frederickson was the chair of the Planning Commission, and we were going through each module word by word. So when you talk about amending it, it's kind of just reminds me of all of that. And that you're just gonna probably revise it, but that's fine. That's the way it goes. You know, you have your time and then your time, and that's it. And then the next, someone else, you hand the baton off. But I think, I kind of agree with Luke on this. I think, my usual bent would be to say, let's do this all with the general plan. Let's be, and I think for the most part, that's kind of where my head's at. Let's be as efficient as possible. Let's rework what we can do all at once when you got it all worked out. But maybe if there is anything, I wouldn't want to impose on staff additional requirements or, slow down the bigger projects that you have in the pipeline, which are many, and we probably are understaffed, I would imagine. So I think, keeping that in mind, if there is something that you think that you can bring back and kind of take off or see the future a little bit on what might be in the next phase of things, and you can work something out, then I'd be okay with that and bringing that back. But again, I don't want to have 3 code amendments coming back piecemeal when we have all these big things going on. So I think it's going to take some more thought. So I don't think tonight I'm going to be making any motions on any of these items, but to move forward with them. But I do, if there's any thought that the staff could give to it and see if there's anything that can be worked out, then I'd be in favor of that. So that, because the work of the Planning Commission, it needs, they work really hard. They have long meetings, as I kind of alluded to before. So yeah, we should make sure we appreciate all that work. And thank you very much.
Councilmember Emilio.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. You have a tremendous amount of items on your plate. And I think we all need to be very sensitive of all the priorities you have, which you have mentioned, that this is, to me, a low picking fruit. I really don't think we need to be piling more stuff on community development. And I could see where, and I may get, some of these requirements came up during the approval of the ATC project and the Clinton Hotel. And to me, they're approved. And I don't think we should be moving any more after what you said and how much, and I appreciate what you said about how much the community development is going. And I'm sure you've got 100 people working there. Am I correct? No. So I believe we should not move anything and go by the staff recommendation to not move forward with the proposed zoning text amendments at this time.
Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you, Your Honor. I guess what I would say is I feel like we need to really do a balance of the two. And I appreciate you starting the presentation with the proposal that we're not saying don't do it, because I think they're really good recommendations. And we depend on our planning commission to kind of look at the things that are important for the city, see where the issues lie, bring those to our attention and help us remedy them. So I think it's critical for us to proceed with them. Absolutely. It does make sense to, I guess what I would want to be certain of if we don't move on a recommendation tonight, not that there's specifically one proposed, but I think what's important is to clarify that as a council, we want to make sure these recommendations are implemented as the new zoning codes are put in place. I kind of see the logic behind, we don't want to pull time now from this when this is a time critical thing because there are other potential consequences for not finishing the housing element in the general plan in a timely manner. But I think these will integrate really well with what we're going to be doing with the general plan and the zoning. So I would say thank you very much to the Planning Commission for all your hard work on this and for bringing this forward. And I think we absolutely need to be implementing these as we move forward. Would you have, so there have been suggestions, and thank you for the public's comments too, because I would agree that they've been being ignored for too long and that has to stop. And it sounds like you would agree with that and you don't have any objections to the specific plans themselves. It's just you want some flexibility in when you're going to implement them in. That said, are there any of them in for the sake of moving forward with something, are there any you've seen that might make sense and not take as much time to implement more immediately? Or what plan would you be, so assuming we decided we wanted to see all these implemented, what would your plan be for doing that? And what timeline would we be talking about that would be the most efficient, but also meet the goals?
Certainly, thank you. And one thing to keep in mind is we will be doing some zoning text amendments coming up shortly as part of the housing element update. Because there will be some required zoning code amendments, either through rezoning or upzoning of properties, but also ensuring that we have objective development standards, which is required by state law. So coming up within probably the first half of next year, you will be seeing a package of zoning code amendments as part of the housing element update and general plan update. And I think what we could do is, I do have to be careful because I know that we have our consultant that is working with us on that effort. And we need to be cognizant of what is scoped into their contract. But I think throughout this process, there may be a way where we can start to look at how and when we could integrate some of these proposals. I will tell you that staff also has a very long running list of things that we would like to update in the code because it is old, it's out of date. It doesn't match a lot of current day business models and uses. A lot of the procedural steps are very clunky and very difficult to explain to customers at the counter and over the phone. So I'm in complete agreement with the council and with the Planning Commission that there is definitely a lot of work that is needed on our zoning code. But I think that we could probably work throughout the rest of this year to identify a plan to begin working with these. And I would like to request maybe right after we get finished with the housing element, which would be we're hoping the first quarter or the first half of next year.
When you say first quarter, do you mean fiscal quarter or calendar quarter?
Calendar
Okay.
quarter, yeah. You know, with the, we'll be going back with the proposed updated housing sites to Planning Commission in June and hopefully here to Council in July. That put us about 4 to 5 months off of schedule. Once we get through, get your thumbs up on the the proposed opportunity sites, then we restart everything back up with the whole general plan update, the EIR, and we'll be putting together a revised schedule at that time. But I would like to see what that schedule looks like first, because I think we're going to probably it was an aggressive schedule to begin with. Now we've run about 4 to 5 months behind and we're going to want to try to make some of that time up. So I would like to see where we are in terms of the housing element, general plan update and EIR before committing to a schedule on additional zoning text amendments that aren't part of that housing element process.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I noticed Mr. Murphy's here. Can we have him speak to the Planning Commission's thoughts on if there are certain things that we could have? Is there something you would think would be important to do prior to the proposal.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, council members, the Director Vaughn said many of the things I was going to say. And I'd like to emphasize our zoning code is in terrible shape. It's poorly written. There are ambiguities, there are inconsistencies. It's vague. As the director mentioned, it hasn't kept up with best practices. It hasn't kept up with our changing world. And every community development director I've talked to in the past dozen years has acknowledged that. And they've also all said, you know, we don't have the time and we don't have the budget to fix it. Several years ago, in an attempt to help, we went to the planning commission went to the then community development director, who had a list of between 50 and 60 things that she thought would be fixed, should be fixed. We said, how can we help? And she and the commission worked on getting that list smaller, and we tackled some of, we thought, the easier items. We're not planners. We're citizen volunteers. We learned a lot, but our expectation was that we would take our best crack and then ask the planning staff and the legal staff to turn our attempts into a better code. I guess in a funny way at this point, I wouldn't be in favor of piecemealing things. I think the director's suggestion makes sense. There's a lot to do on the housing element, the general plan update, and the zoning updates. And I just hope, but this puts us back at the beginning again. Planning is saying we can't do it. We don't have time to do it. So I just hope from you, we could get a commitment at some point to spend the money to revise the code. So it's a code we can be proud of. Right now, residents, architects, builders, planners, they have a hard time interpreting the code. It really is in bad shape. My guess is that Mr. Pierrick's firm would have a hard time doing it. And more than one planning commissioner has told me we're lucky we're not in court all the time because our code is so bad. But having said all that, I'm not sure how my colleagues would feel, but I'm content with following the director's suggestion and trying to do it when it fits in. I would like to speak briefly about story polls. So the agenda report mentioned previous city managers subcommittee recommendation, which was basically the status quo. And this was all done in the midst of community-wide discussion of the ATC building. The ATC folks didn't want to have to put up story polls. A lot of residents thought they should. There was a planning commissioner on the city manager's advisory committee on story polls. When the city manager came out with a memorandum theoretically representing what the subcommittee had done, and the planning commission representative was shocked. He thought they were going to have more meetings. The ad hoc subcommittee didn't see the memorandum before it was published, and the planning commission representative didn't think it reflected what the subcommittee had said. Several years after that, there was a constant appeal from members of the public for us to address story polls. And we did that with the subcommittee and with public hearings. The members of the subcommittee talked to a lot of architects, builders, residents. They talked to a lot of planners at other jurisdictions and came up with what I think is a very good recommended policy and zoning code amendments for story polls. The agenda report suggested that perhaps that would require secret analysis and perhaps even an LCP amendment. My suggestion would be to tackle that one first, and as a first step, see if CEQA would apply and see if we would need an LCP amendment. And depending upon the answer, it's there. I would move ahead with story polls. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. That was very helpful. And I guess my point is, I think it's critical that at this point, this happens like not right now, but that it's integrated into this and it actually happens, because I think it's a very much a community priority. And I appreciate that you spoke to the fact that it is hard for you to even help people navigate. So I'm glad to hear that it sounds like we're all on the same page now. And I guess if we're not going to implement the resolutions right now, I think maybe it helps as a body to say, we are agreeing with implementing in what's coming, and it will be an integral part of the process of the zoning that's coming. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you, Sandy.
This is an interesting state of affairs we find ourselves in. Um, and for those folks that want to have a fully up-to-date general plan and zoning code, and everything needs to be tightened up and up to date and internally consistent, well, it's not going to happen today, that's for sure. So where do we go with this? There's some real ongoing issues. One of the things that's come up in our discussion tonight that I'm concerned with is just ongoing issues like the appurtenances. For example, we wind up spending a lot of time through committees and staff on just dealing with that definition. So you, Councilmember Coletti, you strike a chord with me on that one, because if we don't spend any time on it, it's going to take our time. There's no question about it. We were just talking about that for the property on Ocean View Boulevard, 773 Ocean View Boulevard, right, with the elevator shaft up. So I'm thinking, yeah, there's certainly perhaps some definitions that we need to clean up sooner, because it'll save us time and staff time. I'm concerned about the story polls also. I think this advisory committee memo, it's basically a get out of jail free card. It's like, when whoever makes the determination, I don't know whether it's planning director, I wasn't clear on that. But when they say it's unsafe, then no story polls. And, maybe that's the answer, but we should just write it out. We should agree on who's making the final determination on it, instead of leaving it to just someone waving the flag of, oh, it's not safe. So that requirement gets thrown out the window. So I don't know if that's something that advisory committee, a memorandum from 2020 doesn't make too much sense to me. And the comments about when these things were coming up was absolutely, it was during the Hotel Durrell and the ATC, both the parking and the story polls. And I don't know, story polls, is it an issue today? If it's just applied to all the residences, no more than 25 foot, okay, 30 foot in the retreat. Maybe it's not a burning issue today, because we're not putting up there's no commercial properties in the pipeline, right? So help us with a plan to see this go forward. I wasn't really clear on this third, the hotel, well, all these, I understand the benefit of waiting until there's this larger effort that Rincon is helping us with to be consistent with the new effort. But I don't know where all these pieces fit. And so maybe you could help us out by giving us
Mr.
game
Mayor,
plan.
if I could, and maybe Karen can help me with this. In terms of the definitions, I'm assuming that some of those definitions might be able to be incorporated, whatever you're doing, what you're doing for the housing element. So my suggestion, at least to get some progress made, would be just to identify and maybe bring those back in a short report for the council so they have a chance just to weigh in on the item, and you come up with kind of a short list that could be incorporated into the housing element zoning update, and at least that provides some sort of a starting point.
I think that sounds good, because then that indicates, we don't want to drop it, but there is a specific place where this should be taken back up.
And sooner than later.
Yeah, it's not just, we're just going to defer this down the road for a few more years.
Yeah, and I can actually tell you that some of the proposed changes to the definitions are going to be part of the zoning text amendments as part of the housing element. Things like, how do you measure height, right? From the ground to the roof, to the midpoint of the roof, to the midpoint of the lot. That's one of those definitions that our consultant has identified as needing to be cleaned up in terms of being able to use it as an objective development standard. It needs to be very clear in how you measure height. There shouldn't be any subjectivity or ambiguity. So there are some of these things that will come through as part of the zoning amendments with the housing element update. But I think what potentially I could offer, like I said, once we get the housing opportunity sites through the Planning Commission and Council, and we get that locked in, and we can then revamp the housing element schedule. I think after that, then I could potentially come back with a follow-up report on this to talk about potential scheduling of some of the zoning text amendments. Right now, it's that housing elements and EIR schedule that's in flux, and I want to see where that is before being able to hone in on a schedule of moving forward with the text amendments.
It sounds good to me. Councilmember McDonald.
Thank you. If 1-to-1 ratio is the best ratio for hotels. I don't know if there are statistics out there that talk about how many parking spaces are used. But then my other thought was, well, if we have spare parking spaces, maybe the public could then park there and pay to park. But my question would be, can't it be written to where it would incorporate the concerns that you mentioned, where there would be flexibility for other alternatives, whether that be offsite or having offsite transportation and things like that, and still achieve the same objective to make sure that we're providing enough parking for the hotel or alternatives that mitigate the need for as much parking?
Yeah, and I've actually worked on parking ordinances in other cities. And I know, for instance, here in Pacific Grove, we do have the downtown parking district where the businesses and properties in downtown can take advantage of the overall shared parking that is within downtown. Typically, when you're making changes to parking standards, you do some sort of parking study or parking analysis that helps to inform the standards that you're wanting to change. I myself don't know what a good modern typical ratio of hotel rooms to hotel parking spaces would be. That's not my forte. There are firms out there that specialize specifically in this type of thing, and we would normally have perhaps like a downtown parking study done to tell us, do we have excess parking in downtown? Are we running short of parking in downtown? when we move forward with large projects like hotel projects or potentially large commercial projects, do we want to incorporate some sort of public parking for use on nights and weekends and holidays? I've done that up in Redwood City. But these are all things that take time and effort to flesh out, and you do want to have good analysis and data to base your decisions on.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think the most important thing is we're seeing inadequate parking provided, leading to that being pushed out into the neighborhoods. And that's what we're really trying to avoid. And so as long as we're addressing those in a smart way, and I appreciate your answer because it shows that you're thinking about that and how could we implement this in a way that actually addresses the issue in the most effective way. So, thanks.
And I think I can speak for my colleagues. Thanks very much to the Planning Commission for obviously a lot of effort that's gone into these documents and willing to work with staff and bring it forward to us. You know, without your help, things don't necessarily get done or get done in a timely way. So I know this isn't the full cake that the Planning Commission wanted, but yeah, a piece of it. So please convey our appreciation. Councilmember Cleddy.
Do we have direction? Okay.
Sure was. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
all right. Should we move on to item 13D then?
This won't take long. What you have before you here is the seeking direction to the city manager to work with the city clerk to provide notice to candidates, advising them that there is no time limit in advance of an election for the posting of signs. The city's current municipal code provides that political signs shall be placed, posted, or erected no earlier than 6 weeks before the election to which they pertain and shall be removed within 7 days following such election. The limitation of 6 weeks before the election is not consistent with the legal requirements set forth in the cases that are referenced in the agenda report. So what our recommendation is at this time is that, as I indicated in my opening comments, that the council direct the city manager to work with the clerk to let the candidates know that there is not going to be a time limit. On a going forward basis, after tonight, some future date, we're proposing to come back with some other amendments to your sign code. And this would be one of the amendments that we would propose at that time. So I think that we can resolve this issue of the timeliness by having the city clerk let the candidates know. And that's one of the reasons it's on your agenda tonight, is so that the public is aware that, and candidates are aware that the posting of signs earlier than 6 weeks is permissible. And I'm available to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment?
No virtual public comment, Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, after hearing that was such a compelling argument, I'm going to move recommendation 1, please.
Second.
Discussion on the motion? Councilmember Emilio.
You know, I hesitated to say anything, but I think I started this during the last campaign. I started a little bit earlier, but thank you, Mr. Piarek, for throwing this particular one, and I agree with the recommendation. You know, was it seconded already?
Yes, it
Okay.
was.
Good.
Councilmember McDonald.
One quick question I do have, because this may come back to us from the public at some point, is there were a lot of members of the public that weren't happy about it, and I understand the law says you can't. Are there any bounds whatsoever? Because we don't want to see public, you know, political signs year round, obviously. Is there no room for that in the laws whatsoever? And I'm asking so that that's another point that's clarified for the public as well.
Well, there are no cases that say, for example, it's okay to have one that says that it can't be any sooner than 90 days before that. We don't have that direction. But what we do have are the cases that's fine that the limitations that currently exist are not consistent with the First Amendment. So my suggestion for you tonight is let's give the direction to the city manager that I've recommended, and then I can certainly address that issue on a going forward basis when we come back with proposed amendments to the city sign code, including this section as well.
Sounds great. Thank you.
And I'd like to know if I get the award for the shortest agenda report.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 502. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Thank you to the public for their participation. Thank you to staff. Thank you to my colleagues. And we are adjourning in honor of Mr. Peralt, who's soon to depart for greener pastures.
Just a final comment from me. I know it's getting late, but I can't express to you how much I've appreciated all the fine teamwork and during the last 6 months, all the support and the healthy dialogue I've witnessed at these meetings. So thank you again for a great experience at what might be the actual last city council meeting that I ever served in this capacity as. Thank you.
Well, with that, meeting adjourned.